Tonight, a 32-year-old single father living a quiet life with his young daughter will accidentally fix something an entire team of million-dollar engineers couldn't solve. A powerful, ice-cold CEO who swore never to trust anyone suddenly faces the one person who can save her empire. What begins with a broken-down luxury car on a dark highway will spiral into corporate warfare, hidden betrayal, and a custody battle that could destroy everything. Two lives that should never have crossed paths are about to collide, and neither of them will ever be the same. Stay with me until the end, hit that like button, and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. The fluorescent light above Bay 3 had been flickering for 2 weeks. Lucas kept meaning to fix it, but every time he looked up at that buzzing tube, something else broke down, or a customer showed up, or Emma needed help with homework. So it flickered. On and off. On and off. Like everything else in his life. Never quite steady, never quite right. He was under a '98 Camry when he heard the engine. Not the usual rattle and wheeze of the trucks and beaters that limped into Hale's garage. This was different, smooth, expensive. The kind of purr that came from German engineering and a price tag with too many zeros. Lucas rolled out from under the Camry, wiping his hands on a rag that had been gray since Obama's first term. Through the open bay door, he could see headlights cutting through the November dark. High-end LED beams, not the yellow fog of normal headlights. The car pulled onto the gravel lot and stopped. For a long moment, nothing happened. Just the engine idling, smooth as silk, and Lucas standing there with grease under his fingernails, wondering what the hell a car like that was doing 12 miles outside Cedar Falls at 9:30 on a Tuesday night. The driver's door opened. She stepped out like she was walking into a boardroom, not a roadside garage that smelled like oil and old coffee. Tall, maybe 5'9", dark hair pulled back so tight it could have been painted on. A coat that probably cost more than Lucas made in 3 months. And a face that looked like it had been carved from ice. Beautiful, sure, but the kind of beautiful that kept you at a distance. She looked at the garage, then at Lucas. Her expression didn't change. "Are you open?" Her voice matched her face. Cool, precise. The kind of voice that didn't ask questions, it gave instructions. Lucas glanced back at Bay 3, where the Camry sat half-finished. "Depends on what you need. My car died." She said it the way someone might say my assistant made an error. Annoyed, inconvenienced, already thinking about who to blame. Died how? It just stopped. She gestured at the car with one hand. Everything went dark, the dashboard, the lights, everything. Lucas walked over, his boots crunching on gravel. Up close, the car was even more impressive. A Mercedes S-Class, current year, black paint so perfect it looked wet. The kind of car that had more computers than NASA. You try to restart it? Obviously. The word had an edge. Nothing happened. He walked around to the driver's side. Keys? She pulled them from her coat pocket and handed them over without getting any closer than necessary, like he might be contagious. Lucas slid into the driver's seat, leather so soft it felt illegal, and turned the key. Nothing. Not even a click. The dashboard stayed dark, the engine silent. "How long you been driving?" "I left the city at 7. "Straight through?" "Yes." No warning lights, no weird sounds. Nothing. It was fine, and then it wasn't. She crossed her arms. "Can you fix it or not?" Lucas climbed out of the car and popped the hood. "Let me take a look." The engine bay was pristine. No oil leaks, no loose belts, no visible damage. Everything exactly where it should be. He grabbed a flashlight from his belt and started checking connections. Behind him, he could hear her heels clicking on the concrete as she paced. Short, sharp sounds that matched her voice. "How long will this take?" "Don't know yet. I have a meeting at 7 tomorrow morning in the city. That's 10 hours away. I'm aware of the time." More ice in her voice now. "I'm asking if you can fix it tonight." Lucas straightened up, looking at her over the hood. "Ma'am, I don't even know what's wrong yet. Could be an hour, could be longer, could be something I can't fix here at all." Her jaw tightened, just barely, but he saw it. "There's a motel about 8 miles back," he offered. "The Evergreen. It's clean. You could get a room, come back in the morning. I'm not staying at a motel." She said it like he'd suggested she sleep in a dumpster. Just fix the car. Lucas bit back what he wanted to say and went back to the engine. He'd dealt with difficult customers before. Hell, he'd dealt with Karen Pritchard. who once screamed at him for 20 minutes because he couldn't make her Corolla stop burning oil. This woman was just another version of that. Rich instead of cheap, cold instead of loud, but the same basic problem, thinking the world bent to their schedule. He checked the battery terminals. Solid. The alternator belt. Fine. He traced the main power cables, looking for breaks or corrosion. Nothing. What's your name? Lucas glanced up. She was standing closer now, arms still crossed, watching him like he was a bug under glass. Lucas? Lucas Hale. And you run this establishment? Yeah. By yourself? Mostly. He went back to the engine. Got a part-time kid who comes in on weekends. How long have you been a mechanic? What? 14 years, since I was 18. He moved the flashlight beam across the fuse box. You got a name, or should I just keep calling you ma'am? A pause. Naomi Voss. The name tickled something in the back of Lucas's brain. He'd heard it before, seen it maybe, news, magazine. He couldn't place it, and right now he didn't care. Well, Ms. Voss, your car's got full electrical failure. Everything's dead, but the battery's good, the alternator's good, all the physical components check out. So what's wrong with it? That's what I'm trying to figure out. Lucas closed the hood and walked around to the trunk. Pop this for me? She reached through the driver's window and pulled the release. The trunk opened with a soft hydraulic hiss. Inside, it was just as pristine as the engine bay. Carpet-like hotel luxury. The spare tire well covered by a fitted panel. And tucked in the corner, a leather briefcase and a laptop bag. Lucas lifted the panel covering the spare. Underneath, next to the tire, was a junction box. He opened it, and there it was. A wire, thick, important-looking, the kind that carried serious voltage, had come loose from its terminal. Not broken, not cut, just disconnected. Probably vibration from the road, a manufacturing defect, bad luck. One wire, one connection, and the whole electrical system had shut down. He reconnected it, made sure the terminal was tight, and closed the junction box. Try it now. Naomi slid back into the driver's seat and turned the key. The dashboard lit up like Christmas. The engine purred to life, smooth and perfect, like it had never been dead at all. She sat there for a moment, staring at the glowing dashboard. Then she got out. What was it? Loose power cable in the trunk junction box. Lucas closed the trunk. Probably been vibrating loose for a while, just finally came all the way off. And that killed everything? That killed everything. She looked at him. Really looked at him, for the first time since she'd arrived. Her eyes were dark, brown maybe, hard to tell in the garage light, and sharp, calculating. How much do I owe you? $40. Her eyebrows rose, just a fraction. 40. 15 minutes of labor. That's my rate. I see. She reached into her coat and pulled out a wallet. Sleek black leather. Probably cost more than his toolbox. She handed him a $100 bill. Keep the change. Oh, I've got change. Keep it. She was already walking back to the car. Consider it a finder's fee. Lucas pocketed the bill, watching her. Something was off. She wasn't relieved the way people usually were when their car got fixed. She wasn't grateful or even satisfied. She just looked thoughtful, like he'd done something interesting instead of something helpful. She paused at the car door. You said you've been a mechanic for 14 years? That's right. Where did you train? A couple different places, mostly on the job. No formal education? Lucas felt his spine straighten. I've got certifications. ASE Master Tech, Ford Specialist. I know what I'm doing. I'm sure you do. She opened the door. That junction box you found, where is it exactly? Trunk, under the spare tire cover, left side. How did you know to look there? I didn't. I just looked everywhere until I found the problem. Whoa! Go on, you guys. She smiled. It was small, barely there, and it didn't reach her eyes. Thank you, Mr. Hale. She got in the car and drove away. The red taillights disappeared down the highway, and Lucas stood in the gravel lot listening to the November wind and wondering what the hell that was about. Eek. He locked up at 11. The Camry could wait until tomorrow. Mrs. Patterson wasn't in any rush, never was. Lucas turned off all the lights except the one in the office, set the security system, and walked across the lot to his truck. The F-150 started on the third try. Bad starter, probably. He kept meaning to fix it, but the cobbler's children and all that. The drive home took 12 minutes. Same roads he'd driven for 8 years, since he'd moved back to Cedar Falls with a 2-month-old baby and no idea what he was doing. Past the Dairy Queen that closed at 9, the elementary school where Emma went, the dollar store that somehow sold everything except what you actually needed. His house was the fourth one on Maple Street. Small, 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, a kitchen that hadn't been updated since the 80s. The porch light was on. He always left it on for Emma, and through the front window he could see the blue glow of the TV. Mrs. Chen opened the door before he could get his keys out. "She's asleep," the old woman said, keeping her voice low. "Went down at 8:30. Did her homework, ate her dinner, no trouble." "Thanks, Mrs. Chen." Lucas pulled out his wallet. "What do I owe you?" "Same as always, 20. He handed her the money, plus 10 extra. She always protested the tip, and he always gave it anyway. "Big spender tonight?" She pocketed the bills with a knowing look. "Good day?" "Strange day." Lucas held the door open for her. "Lady with a fancy car broke down outside the shop. Fixed it in 15 minutes. She gave me $100. "100? For 15 minutes?" Mrs. Chen shook her head. "Rich people. They don't understand money." "Guess not." "Well, don't spend it all in one place." She patted his arm and headed down the porch steps toward her own house next door. "See you Thursday?" "See you Thursday." Lucas closed the door quietly and kicked off his boots. The living room was a mess. Emma's backpack on the couch, her shoes by the TV, a half-finished glass of milk on the coffee table next to her math homework. He picked up the glass and checked the homework. Multiplication. She'd gotten most of them right. The last 3 were wrong, but she'd tried. That was what mattered. He walked down the short hallway to her room and eased the door open. Emma was sprawled across her twin bed, blankets twisted around her legs. Her stuffed rabbit clutched against her chest. Her nightlight, shaped like a moon, cast soft white light across her face. 8 years old, dark hair like her mother, blue eyes like him, he guessed. Though sometimes when he looked at her, he couldn't see either of them. She was just Emma, entirely her own person. He straightened her blankets and kissed her forehead. She stirred, but didn't wake. "Love you, kid," he whispered. Then he went to take a shower and tried not to think about the woman with the ice-cold eyes who'd given him $100 for doing his job. Seek. The next morning started the way it always did. Emma's alarm at 6:30. Pancakes and orange juice. The scramble to find her library book. The argument about whether she needed a jacket. She did. November mornings were cold. Yes, even if she was going to be inside most of the day. Lucas dropped her at school at 7:40. Watched her run across the parking lot to where her friend Sadie was waiting, then drove back to the garage. Mrs. Patterson's Camry, then a brake job on a Dodge Ram, then an oil change on a Honda Civic that was leaking fluid from somewhere he couldn't quite find. The morning disappeared into work the way it always did. Grease and metal and the simple logic of broken things that could be fixed. At noon, a black town car pulled into the lot. Lucas was eating a sandwich in the office when he saw it through the window. The town car stopped next to the gas pumps, even though the pumps had been out of service for 3 years. A man in a suit got out from the driver's side, not just a suit. Suit. Charcoal gray, perfect fit, tie that probably cost more than Lucas's entire wardrobe. The man looked around the garage like he was inspecting a crime scene, then walked toward the office. Lucas set down his sandwich and went to meet him. "Help you?" "Lucas Hale? That's me." The man reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card. Heavy stock, expensive printing. Lucas took it. "Naomi Voss, Chief Executive Officer, Voss Industries." Below that, a phone number and an email address. "Ms. Voss would like to speak with you," the man said. "Are you available this afternoon?" Lucas looked at the card, then at the man. "She sent you all the way out here to ask me that, ma. Miss Voss doesn't make requests lightly. Are you available?" "For what?" "A conversation regarding potential employment." Lucas almost laughed. "Employment?" "Ms. Voss was impressed with your diagnostic work last night. She'd like to discuss an opportunity." "I've got a business to run." "She's prepared to compensate you for your time." The man didn't blink. $500 for the meeting. whether you accept the position or not. $500 for a meeting. Lucas thought about Emma's winter coat that was getting too small, the starter in his truck that needed replacing, the stack of bills in the desk drawer that he was juggling like a circus act. When? Now. I'll drive you to the city and back. 2 hours door to door. I can't just leave. Ms. Voss anticipated that concern. The man pulled out an envelope from his other pocket. $1,000. $500 for the meeting, $500 to close your business for the afternoon. Lucas stared at the envelope. This is insane. Ms. Voss values efficiency. Do you accept? Oops. He should say no. This was crazy. You didn't just get in a car with some suit who showed up offering money like it was nothing. You didn't abandon your business in the middle of the day for a mysterious meeting with a woman you'd spent 15 minutes with, but $1,000. Let me lock up, Lucas said. The town car was exactly as expensive on the inside as it looked on the outside. Leather seats, climate control, a privacy screen between the front and back. Lucas sat in the back, still wearing his work clothes. Jeans with permanent grease stains, a flannel shirt that had seen better days, boots that had seen worse. The driver didn't speak, just pulled out of the lot and headed toward the highway. Lucas looked down at the business card still in his hand. Voss Industries. He pulled out his phone and Googled it. The results made his stomach drop. Voss Industries, Advanced Engineering and Manufacturing, valued at $2.3 billion. CEO Naomi Voss, 34, named one of Fortune's 40 under 40, specializing in precision automotive components and industrial automation. There were pictures. Naomi Voss at conferences. Naomi Voss on magazine covers. Naomi Voss shaking hands with people Lucas vaguely recognized from the news. He scrolled through articles. Words jumped out. Ruthless, innovative, uncompromising. Transformed her father's failing company into an industry leader in less than 5 years. One article had a quote from an unnamed executive. Working for Naomi Voss is like working for a machine. She doesn't care about your feelings, your excuses, or your ego. She cares about results. If you can't deliver, you're gone. Lucas put his phone away and stared out the window. What the hell had he fixed last night? Shit. The city rose up like a wall of glass and steel. Lucas had been here before, years ago, before Emma, when he'd thought maybe he'd do something other than turn wrenches for a living. That hadn't worked out. The town car pulled into an underground parking garage beneath a building that looked like it cost more than his entire hometown. The driver parked, came around, and opened Lucas's door. Take the elevator to the 40th floor. Ms. Voss's assistant will meet you. Lucas got out. The garage smelled like concrete and money. He followed the signs to the elevator, pressed the button, and waited. The elevator arrived with a soft chime. Lucas stepped inside, and the doors closed. For a moment, he caught his reflection in the polished steel. He looked exactly like what he was. A guy from nowhere, in over his head, about to walk into a room where he didn't belong. The elevator climbed, 40 floors. Lucas's ears popped. The doors opened. The office on the other side was white. Not just white-walled, but white everything. White floors, white ceiling, white furniture, floor-to-ceiling windows showing the city spread out below like a toy model. And behind a glass desk sat a woman in her 20s, blonde, wearing a headset and an expression of professional boredom. Mr. Hale? Yeah. Ms. Voss is expecting you. Through that door, please. She gestured to a door on the left. Frosted glass. No handle. Lucas walked over, and it opened automatically. The office beyond was 3 times the size of his entire garage. Same windows, same view. But instead of white, everything here was dark. Charcoal furniture, black accents, a desk that looked like it belonged in a design museum. And behind the desk, Naomi Voss. She was reading something on her computer, fingers moving across the keyboard with mechanical precision. She didn't look up when he entered. Sit. Lucas sat in one of the chairs across from her desk. Expensive leather. Uncomfortable in that way expensive things often were. Naomi finished whatever she was typing, then looked at him. Same ice-cold expression as last night, like the 12 hours in between had never happened. You found the junction box problem in less than 20 minutes, she said. No greeting, no small talk. How? I looked for it. My engineers looked for 3 hours before I got in the car. They didn't find it. Then they weren't looking in the right place. Or you're better than they are. She leaned back in her chair. Do you know what my company does, Mr. Hale? Oh, you make car parts. Industrial stuff. Oh. We make precision components for automotive and industrial applications. We have contracts with every major manufacturer in North America, and most in Europe. Last year, we delivered 2.4 million units with a defect rate of 0.003%. She said it the way someone might recite their phone number. Do you know how we achieve that? Good engineers, the best engineers. People with PhDs from MIT and Stanford. People who have dedicated their entire lives to understanding mechanical systems. She paused. And last night, not one of them could solve a problem that you fixed in 15 minutes. Lucas shifted in his chair. Lucky guess. I don't believe in luck. I believe in competence. Naomi stood and walked to the window. I've built this company on the principle that talent matters more than credentials. I don't care where you went to school or who your father knows. I care if you can do the work. That's great, but I'm offering you a position. Temporary contract, 90 days. You'll work in our engineering division as a diagnostic specialist. Your job will be to solve problems that our regular team can't. Lucas blinked. You want me to work here? Yes. Doing what exactly? Finding what's broken. Fixing it. She turned from the window. The same thing you did last night. Ms. Voss, I appreciate the offer, but I can't. I have a business, a daughter. I can't just pack up and move to the city. You won't have to. The position is on site at our manufacturing facility, 40 minutes from Cedar Falls. You'll work Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. Weekends off. She walked back to her desk and pulled out a folder. Salary is $120,000 per year, prorated for 90 days. Health insurance, dental, vision, 401k matching. Lucas's brain stuttered over the number. I'm sorry, did you say 120,000? Yes. That was more than he made in 3 years, maybe 4. Why? The word came out rough. Why me? Because you're good at what you do. Because you found something trained engineers missed. And because I need someone who thinks differently than everyone else on my team. She opened the folder. This is the contract. Read it. If you have questions, ask them. If you want a lawyer to review it, take it with you, but I need an answer by Friday. Well, Lucas took the folder with hands that didn't feel like his own. The contract inside was 20 pages of dense legal text. He scanned the first page, but the words didn't stick. His brain was still caught on that number. $120,000. I need time to think, he said. You have until Friday, 5 p.m. Naomi sat back down. Anything else? Yeah, Lucas thought. About 100 things. But what came out was, no. Then we're done. My driver will take you back. She turned to her computer and started typing. Just like that, he was dismissed. Lucas stood, still holding the folder, and walked to the door. It opened automatically. He stepped through, and it closed behind him with a soft click. The blonde assistant looked up from her desk. Ground floor? Yeah, Lucas said. Thanks. He took the elevator down, got in the town car, and didn't say a word for the entire drive back to Cedar Falls. Just sat there with a folder in his lap and a number burning in his head. $120,000. Emma was doing homework at the kitchen table when Lucas got home. Math again. Her face scrunched in concentration the way it always did when she was thinking hard. Hey, kiddo. Hey, Dad. She didn't look up from her worksheet. What's 8 times 7? 56. She wrote it down. Thanks. Lucas dropped his keys on the counter and opened the fridge. Leftover spaghetti from 2 nights ago, some milk, a 6-pack of beer he'd been working through since September. He grabbed the milk and drank from the carton. Dad, that's gross. Sorry. He put it back. How was school? Fine, we're doing book reports. I picked Charlotte's Web. Again? It's a good book. Emma looked up at him, finally. You look weird. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. You have your thinking face. Lucas sat down across from her. What's my thinking face? Like this. She made an expression, eyebrows pulled together, mouth tight. It was disturbingly accurate. Smart Alec. She grinned and went back to her homework. Lucas watched her work through the next problem, pencil scratching across paper, hair falling in her face the way it always did when she leaned forward. 8 years old, second grade. Her whole life ahead of her. What kind of life could $120,000 buy her? Emma? Yeah? If you could live anywhere, where would you want to live? She thought about it. Here. Really? Not somewhere exciting? The city, maybe? The city's loud, and it smells weird. She wrote down another answer. I like it here. Sadie's here. And Mrs. Chen, in school. What if I told you we could have more money? Like, enough to buy you new clothes whenever you wanted, or go on vacation, or... Are we poor? Emma looked up, her blue eyes serious. No, Lucas said quickly. We're fine. We're good. Then why are you asking weird questions? Because a woman in a white office offered me more money than I've ever seen, Lucas thought. Because I could give you things I never had. Because maybe this is the chance I've been waiting for since your mom left us. But what he said was, no reason, just curious. Emma went back to her homework, and Lucas went to his room to read the contract. He read it 3 times. Then he Googled half the terms he didn't understand. Then he read it again. The basics were simple. 90-day contract, diagnostic specialist. 120 salary, prorated. He'd work at the Voss Industries manufacturing facility in Sterling Heights, which, according to Google Maps, was 38 minutes from his house. He'd report to someone named Martin Reeves, director of engineering, standard non-compete clause, standard confidentiality agreement. What wasn't standard was the termination clause. Either party may terminate this agreement at any time for any reason with written notice. Upon termination, all compensation ceases immediately, and the employee agrees to return all company property and materials within 24 hours. Translation: they could fire him whenever they wanted. No notice, no severance, no safety net. Lucas set the contract down and stared at his ceiling. The water stain in the corner had gotten bigger. He really needed to check the roof before winter hit. His phone buzzed. Text from Mrs. Chen. Thursday still good for babysitting? My granddaughter wants to visit, but I can move it if you need me. Thursday's perfect, he typed back. Thanks. Another buzz. This one from Kyle, his weekend helper. Can I pick up an extra shift this week? Need the money. Sure. Come in Saturday morning. Lucas put the phone down and closed his eyes. $120,000. Or keep doing what he was doing. Scraping by, juggling bills, fixing misses. Patterson's Camry for the 3rd time this year because her grandson kept driving it like he was in a Fast and Furious movie. His phone buzzed again. He ignored it. Tomorrow, he'd decide. Tonight, he'd just sit here, in his house with the water stain and the broken starter and the daughter who thought they were fine. Maybe they were fine. Maybe fine was enough. But maybe, just maybe, it wasn't. By Thursday, Lucas still hadn't decided. He'd reread the contract. He'd made a list of pros and cons. He'd tried to imagine himself walking into an engineering facility full of people with PhDs, people who'd spent their whole lives studying what he'd learned by doing. The cons list was longer, but the pros list had one entry that outweighed everything else: Emma's future. Thursday afternoon, he picked her up from school and drove to the Dairy Queen. They sat in a booth by the window, Emma with a chocolate sundae, Lucas with coffee he wasn't drinking. Okay, what's going on? Emma pointed her spoon at him. You've been weird all week. I got a job offer. You have a job? A different job, working for a company, good money. Emma ate a spoonful of ice cream. Do you want to do it? I don't know. Would we have to move? No, I'd just be gone during the day. Like now, but different hours. Would Mrs. Chen still watch me? Probably. Then what's the problem? Lucas wrapped his hands around the coffee cup. It's complicated, kiddo. Adults always say that when they don't want to explain things. Emma dug into her sundae again. Is it scary? Yeah, Lucas admitted. It's scary. Why? Because I don't know if I'm good enough. Eat. Emma looked at him like he'd just said the dumbest thing in the world. Dad, you fix everything. This is different. How? These people are really smart. They went to fancy schools and have all these degrees, and I learned from other mechanics. I didn't go to college. So maybe I'm not smart enough. Emma set down her spoon. Remember when I didn't want to try out for soccer? Yeah. And you said I'd never know if I was good unless I tried? Oh, Lucas smiled despite himself. I remember. Well, Emma picked up her spoon again. Same thing. Out of the mouths of babes. They finished their ice cream in silence, and Lucas drove home with his daughter's words rattling around in his head. You'd never know if I was good unless I tried. That night, after Emma went to bed, Lucas sat at his kitchen table with the contract in front of him and a pen in his hand. He thought about the garage. 14 years of oil changes and brake jobs and diagnosing weird noises that turned out to be nothing. 14 years of knowing exactly what he was doing, exactly where he stood. He thought about Naomi Voss and her ice-cold eyes, and the way she'd said, I believe in competence, like it was a religion. He thought about Emma growing up in a house with a water-stained ceiling and a father who was too scared to take a chance. Then he signed the contract. Friday at 4:30, Lucas walked into the white office on the 40th floor and handed the folder to the blonde assistant. I need to give this to Ms. Voss. The assistant took it without looking up. She's in a meeting. I'll make sure she gets it. I signed it, Lucas said. The contract. I'm taking the job. Now she looked up. Oh, congratulations. Thanks. Lucas stood there awkwardly for a moment. So what happens now? Someone from HR will contact you with your start date and orientation details. She smiled, professional, distant. Welcome to Voss Industries. Lucas nodded and turned to leave. He was halfway to the elevator when he heard the door to Naomi's office open. Mr. Hale. He turned. Naomi stood in the doorway, the contract folder in her hand. She looked exactly the same as she had the first time he'd seen her. Ice and expensive clothes and a face that gave nothing away. Monday, she said. 8 a.m. Don't be late. Then she went back into her office and closed the door. Lucas took the elevator down, got in his truck, and drove home. His hands were shaking on the steering wheel. He told himself it was just adrenaline, just nerves, just the normal human response to doing something terrifying. But deep down, he knew the truth. He'd just gambled everything on a 15-minute fix and the instinct that maybe, just maybe, he was good enough to run with people who were supposed to be better than him. On Monday, he'd find out if he was right, or if he just made the biggest mistake of his life. Monday morning came too fast. Lucas stood in front of his bathroom mirror at 6:15, staring at the only button-down shirt he owned that didn't have grease stains. It was blue, wrinkled despite his best efforts with an iron that barely worked, and about 2 years out of style. He'd paired it with jeans, his newest pair, which wasn't saying much, and the boots he wore to church when Emma had her Christmas concert. He looked like exactly what he was, a mechanic pretending to be something else. You look nice, Dad. Emma stood in the doorway, still in her pajamas, holding her stuffed rabbit. You think so? Yeah, your shirt has buttons and everything. Lucas managed a smile. High praise. Are you nervous? No, he lied. Emma walked over and hugged him around the waist. She'd been doing that more often lately, these random hugs, like she could sense when he needed them. Maybe she could. Kids were weird like that. You're gonna be great, she said into his shirt. Thanks, kiddo. He kissed the top of her head. Mrs. Chen's gonna pick you up from school, okay? I might be late tonight. Okay. And remember, homework first, then TV. I know, Dad. She pulled back and looked up at him. I'm 8, not stupid. It never said you were stupid. Lucas grabbed his keys from the counter. Love you. Love you too. He walked out to his truck, which started on the second try instead of the third. Progress. The drive to Sterling Heights took 42 minutes, 4 minutes longer than Google had promised, because apparently Google didn't account for the morning shift change at the lumber mill. The Voss Industries facility sat just off the highway like a fortress made of steel and glass. 3 buildings, all identical, all massive, surrounded by parking lots that could have held 1,000 cars. Lucas pulled into one of the visitor spots near the front entrance and sat there for a moment, engine running, hands on the wheel. "You can still turn around," a voice in his head whispered. "Tell them you made a mistake. Go back to the garage where you know what you're doing." But then he thought about the contract he'd signed, the money they were paying him. Emma's face when she hugged him this morning. He turned off the truck and got out. The lobby was exactly what he expected. More glass, more steel, more everything designed to make you feel small. A security desk sat in the center, manned by a guard who looked like he took his job very seriously. "Help you?" "Lucas Hale. I'm supposed to start today." The guard checked his computer. "ID? Betas." Lucas handed over his driver's license. The guard scanned it, typed something, then printed out a temporary badge on a lanyard. "3rd floor. Someone from HR will meet you at the elevator." "Thanks." Lucas clipped the badge to his shirt and walked to the elevators. His reflection stared back at him from the polished doors. He looked terrified. The elevator opened on the 3rd floor to reveal a woman in her 50s, gray hair pulled into a bun, wearing a pantsuit that probably cost more than his truck. "Mr. Hale?" "Yeah." "Barbara Chen, HR director." She held out her hand, and Lucas shook it. Her grip was firm, professional. "Welcome to Voss Industries. If you'll follow me, we'll get you processed." Processing, it turned out, meant 2 hours of paperwork, safety videos, and a tour of the facility that made Lucas's head spin. Barbara walked him through the manufacturing floor, machines the size of houses stamping out metal components with precision that seemed impossible. She showed him the quality control lab, the shipping department, the break room that had coffee better than anything he'd ever tasted. And finally, she brought him to engineering. The engineering department occupied the entire north wing of the 2nd floor. Open floor plan, rows of desks with multiple monitors, people in business casual hunched over CAD software and spreadsheets. The air hummed with focused work and the occasional burst of conversation. Barbara led him to a glass-walled office in the corner. Through the window, Lucas could see a man in his 60s, bald, wearing a polo shirt with the Voss Industries logo. He was on the phone, gesturing emphatically at someone Lucas couldn't see. "That's Martin Reeves," Barbara said. "Your direct supervisor. He's expecting you." She knocked on the door. Martin looked up. "Cheese?" said something into the phone, and hung up. "Come in." Barbara opened the door. "Martin, this is Lucas Hale." Martin stood and came around his desk. He was shorter than Lucas expected, maybe 5'8", with the kind of build that came from spending decades behind a desk. But his handshake was strong, and his eyes were sharp. "Lucas, good to meet you." He gestured to a chair. "Sit. Barbara, thanks for bringing him up." Barbara nodded and left, closing the door behind her. Martin sat back down and pulled up something on his computer. "So, the garage man." Lucas felt his jaw tighten. "That's me. Naomi says you fixed her car in 15 minutes. A problem my team couldn't solve in 3 hours. Martin leaned back in his chair. "That true?" "I got lucky." "Luck." Martin smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Let me tell you something about luck, Lucas. In 14 years of running this department, I've seen a lot of people blame luck for things they don't understand. Good luck, bad luck, dumb luck. But you know what I've never seen?" "What?" "Luck that repeats. If you're good consistently. If you're lucky, you get it once, and then you're back to being average." He leaned forward. "Naomi seems to think you're good. We're about to find out if she's right." "What do you need me to do?" "Right now? Nothing. I'm going to introduce you to the team, get you set up with a desk and computer access. Then we'll see if any problems come up that need your particular skill set." Martin stood. "Fair warning, most of the people out there have advanced degrees from schools you've probably never heard of. They're not going to be thrilled about working with someone who learned on the job." "I can handle it." Can you?" Martin opened the door. "Because the first person who makes you feel stupid, the first time someone talks down to you or questions your credentials, you can't punch them. You can't walk away. You have to smile and do your job. Think you can do that?" Lucas thought about Mrs. Patterson explaining to him how engines worked even though he'd been fixing hers for 6 years. He thought about the time a guy in a BMW had called him a grease monkey and demanded to speak to the real mechanic. "Yeah," he said, "I can do that." Martin studied him for a moment, then nodded. "All right, let's go." The engineering floor went quiet when Martin walked Lucas through it. Not completely silent, but that noticeable drop in conversation that meant everyone was watching without looking like they were watching. Martin stopped at a desk near the windows. "This is yours. Computer's already set up, login credentials are on the sticky note. You've got access to our diagnostic database and most of the engineering files. Anything you can't access, ask IT." Lucas sat down. The desk was pristine, new keyboard, dual monitors, a chair that probably cost more than his couch. The sticky note had a username and a temporary password in neat handwriting. "Questions?" About 1,000, Lucas thought. But what he said was, "No." "Good. I've got a meeting. Get familiar with the systems. Someone will come get you for lunch." Martin started to walk away, then stopped. "Oh, and Lucas? Don't touch anything in the lab without supervision. Last thing I need is you breaking something that costs more than your annual salary." He walked off. Lucas sat there, staring at the monitors, feeling every pair of eyes in the room burning into his back. He logged into the computer. The system opened to a home page with the Voss Industries logo and a dozen different program icons he didn't recognize. He clicked on one labeled Diagnostic Database. A spreadsheet opened, thousands of entries, part numbers, failure codes, resolution notes. Lucas scrolled through it, trying to make sense of the organization. "You're the garage guy, Baswell." Lucas looked up. A woman stood next to his desk, mid-30s, dark hair cut short, wearing a blouse and slacks that screamed engineer. She had a coffee mug in one hand and an expression that was somewhere between curious and condescending. "Lucas," he said. "Rachel Park, senior diagnostic engineer." She didn't offer her hand. "So what makes you qualified to work here?" "Naomi Voss thought I was." "That's not an answer." Lucas met her eyes. "I fix things. That's my qualification." "We all fix things here. Most of us have PhDs to prove we know what we're doing." Rachel sipped her coffee. "What do you have?" "Experience." "How much?" 14 years at... "Doing what? Oil changes?" Lucas felt heat crawl up his neck. "Among other things." "Right." Rachel turned to leave, then paused. "Word of advice? Don't expect us to hold your hand. If you can't keep up, that's on you." She walked away. Lucas watched her go, then turned back to his computer and tried to ignore the whispers he could hear from the other desks. The morning crawled by. Lucas poked through the diagnostic database, trying to understand the system. Every entry was technical: failure mode analysis, root cause investigations, corrective actions. The language was dense, full of acronyms and engineering terminology that might as well have been another language. He was reading about bearing failures when someone tapped on his desk. A guy, younger than Lucas, maybe 25, with glasses and a Voss Industries polo that looked brand new. "Hey, I'm Josh, junior engineer." He stuck out his hand and Lucas shook it. "You're Lucas, right? The new diagnostic guy?" "That's me." "Cool. Martin asked me to bring you to lunch. Cafeteria's on the first floor." Lucas stood, grateful for an excuse to leave the desk. "Lead the way." The cafeteria was nicer than any restaurant Lucas had eaten at in the last 5 years. Multiple stations, salad bar, grill, pasta, Asian fusion, everything made to order, everything fresh. Josh grabbed a tray and headed for the grill. "This place is crazy, right?" Josh said. "I've been here 6 months and I'm still not used to it. Free lunch every day. Coffee bar that's better than Starbucks. My last job, we had a vending machine and a microwave." Lucas got a burger and fries, feeling weird about not paying for it. "How'd you end up here?" "Mechanical engineering degree from state. Applied to like 50 places. Voss was the only one that called back." Josh found a table near the windows. "You?" "Fix Naomi Voss's car." Josh's eyes went wide. "Wait, seriously? That's how you got the job?" "Pretty much. Dude, that's insane. People spend years trying to get hired here." He bit into his sandwich. So what's your background? Where'd you work before? Owned a garage, small place outside Cedar Falls. You owned it? Josh looked impressed. That's cool. Must have been doing pretty well if Naomi noticed you. Lucas didn't have the heart to tell him the garage barely broke even most months. It was all right. They ate in silence for a moment. Lucas watched the other employees, clusters of engineers talking shop, laughing, completely at ease in their expensive clothes and their world of precision and polish. Can I ask you something? Josh said. Sure. Are you freaking out right now? Lucas almost laughed. Is it that obvious? A little. But hey, everyone freaks out at first. This place is intense. Josh lowered his voice. Rachel gave you the hazing speech, didn't she? How'd you know? She does it to everyone new, especially if you don't have a PhD. She's brilliant, but she's also kind of a nightmare. He shrugged. Just ignore her. Do your work, prove you belong here. She'll back off. That easy? Well, no, but it's a start. Josh finished his sandwich and stood. Come on, I'll show you the lab before we head back. The lab was on the second floor, through a set of double doors that required badge access. Inside, it looked like something from a science fiction movie. Testing equipment Lucas couldn't name, machines that hummed and clicked, workbenches covered in components, and tools that made his garage setup look like a kid's toy box. This is where we do failure analysis, Josh said. Something breaks in the field. It comes here. We tear it apart, figure out what went wrong, issue a fix. Lucas walked between the benches, looking at the equipment. What's that? Scanning electron microscope. For looking at metal fatigue and fractures at the microscopic level. Josh pointed to another machine. That's a spectrometer, chemical analysis. And that's a hardness tester. You use all this stuff? Not me personally. The senior engineers do. I mostly run the basic tests and compile data. Josh checked his watch. We should get back. Martin gets pissy if people take long lunches. They headed back upstairs. Lucas spent the afternoon reading through more database entries and trying not to feel completely out of his depth. At 4:30, Martin appeared at his desk. How's your first day? Fine. Learn anything? Still figuring out your system. Good. Don't stay late. We don't pay overtime. Martin walked away, then called back over his shoulder. See you tomorrow. Lucas logged out, grabbed his jacket, and headed for the parking lot. The drive home felt longer than the drive in, probably because his brain was fried from 8 hours of trying to absorb information. Emma was doing homework at the kitchen table when he walked in. Mrs. Chen was washing dishes, humming something under her breath. How was it? Mrs. Chen asked. Different. Different good or different bad? Lucas hung up his jacket. Still deciding. Emma looked up from her math worksheet. Did you fix anything? Not today, kiddo. Today I just learned where stuff was. That's boring. Very boring. Good. He ruffled her hair. What do you want for dinner? Tacos. Tacos it is. Mrs. Chen dried her hands and grabbed her purse. I'll see you tomorrow. See you tomorrow. Thanks, Mrs. Chen. She left, and Lucas started pulling out ingredients for tacos. Emma chattered about her day. Something about a boy named Marcus who ate paste, and a girl named Sophie who could do a cartwheel. Normal kid stuff. Easy to follow, easy to understand. Not like the diagnostic database with its 1,000 entries and incomprehensible technical jargon. They ate tacos at the kitchen table, Emma telling him more stories he half listened to while his brain kept circling back to the look on Rachel's face when she'd asked what qualified him to be there. What did qualify him? A lucky fix on a luxury car? 14 years of turning wrenches? The gut instinct that had gotten him through every weird noise and mysterious breakdown? Maybe Naomi Voss had made a mistake. Maybe he wasn't good enough after all. The first week passed in a blur of learning curves and sideways glances. Lucas showed up every morning at 7:45, logged into his computer, and spent 8 hours trying to understand systems he'd never encountered. The diagnostic database, the engineering software, the protocols and procedures that governed every single thing the department did. Martin gave him small tasks. Review this failure report. Cross-check these part numbers. Nothing important, nothing critical. Just busy work to keep him occupied while everyone else did the real engineering. Rachel ignored him completely. The other engineers treated him like furniture, there, but not worth acknowledging. Only Josh made an effort to include him, eating lunch together most days and explaining things Lucas was too proud to admit he didn't understand. On Friday, Martin called him into his office. "So," Martin said, closing the door. "Week 1. How are you finding it?" "It's a lot to take in." "That's one way to put it." Martin sat on the edge of his desk. "Here's the thing, Lucas. Naomi brought you here because she thinks you can do something my team can't. But so far, all you've done is data entry. That's not why we're paying you 6 figures. You haven't given me anything to diagnose, because I don't know if you can handle it yet." Martin crossed his arms. "Every person on my team has credentials, proof they know what they're doing. You don't have that, so I need to see it before I trust you with anything important." Lucas felt his temper flare. "Then give me something to prove it with." "You want a chance?" Martin walked to his computer and pulled up a file. "Fine. Here's your chance." He turned the monitor so Lucas could see. A technical drawing of some kind of component, housing, seals, bolts. Below it, a wall of text describing a failure. "This is a hydraulic valve assembly for one of our clients. Industrial application, high pressure. We delivered 200 units 3 months ago. 15 have failed in the field. Catastrophic failure. Complete seal breakdown, fluid everywhere, system shut down." Martin tapped the screen. "My team has been working on it for 2 weeks. They think it's a material defect in the seals. I'm not convinced." "What do you want me to do?" "Figure out what's actually wrong. You've got access to the lab, the database, and whatever tools you need. Find the problem, write up your analysis, have it on my desk Monday morning." Martin closed the file. "Think you can handle that?" "Yeah." "Good, because if you can't, this experiment is over." Lucas left the office with the file number burned into his brain and a weekend that suddenly looked very different than he'd planned. Saturday morning, he called Kyle and told him to handle the garage. Then he drove to Sterling Heights, badged into the building, and went straight to the lab. The failed valve assemblies were in storage, tagged and waiting for disposal. Lucas pulled out 3 of them and set them on a workbench. They looked identical: metal housing about the size of a soda can, rubber seals, connection ports. The seals were blown out, cracked and deformed like they'd been cooked. He spent an hour just looking at them, turning them over, checking the housing for cracks, examining the bolt patterns. Nothing obvious. Nothing that screamed, "This is what failed." Then he started disassembling them. The first one came apart easily. He laid out every component in order, the way he'd been doing since he was 18 years old. Housing, seal, spring, piston, retaining ring. He checked each piece, measuring dimensions with calipers, looking for wear patterns. The seal was definitely the failure point, completely destroyed, rubber torn and hardened. But was it a material defect like the team thought? Lucas pulled up the database and searched for the seal specifications. Material type, temperature rating, pressure tolerance. Everything was within spec. The rubber compound was rated for exactly the kind of application it was being used in. So why did it fail? He disassembled the second valve. Same story. Destroyed seal, everything else fine. Third valve. Same thing. Lucas sat back and stared at the components laid out across the bench. 3 identical failures, all seal-related. But the seals themselves weren't defective. They were just dead. Something had killed them. He looked at the housing again. Smooth bore, no scoring, no contamination. Then he noticed something. The bolt holes. 4 of them evenly spaced around the rim. He picked up a bolt and examined it. Standard grade, nothing special. Then he measured the torque marks on the housing. They were uneven, not by much, just a few degrees of rotation difference between bolts, but enough that the housing wasn't seating perfectly flat. Lucas grabbed a flashlight and looked at the seal groove more carefully. There, a tiny gap on one side. Barely visible, maybe a few thousandths of an inch. But in a high-pressure system, that gap would let fluid through, and that fluid, squeezing through a tiny space at high pressure, would generate heat. Enough heat to cook the seal. He pulled out his phone and took pictures. Then he measured the gap on all 3 valves. Same problem, same gap, same uneven bolt torque. It wasn't a seal defect. It was an assembly problem. Lucas spent the rest of Saturday documenting everything. Measurements, photos, comparisons. By the time he left the lab at 8 p.m., he had a 10-page report with pictures and data that showed exactly what had happened. Sunday, he wrote it up properly, formatted it the way the other engineering reports were formatted, added charts, made it look professional instead of like something scrawled on the back of a napkin. Monday morning, he put it on Martin's desk at 7:30. Martin arrived at 8, saw the report, and raised an eyebrow. That was fast. You said Monday morning. Martin picked up the report and started reading. Lucas stood there, hands in his pockets, trying not to look nervous. Martin read for 5 minutes. Then he set the report down and looked at Lucas. Assembly torque sequence. Yeah. My team spent 2 weeks testing seal materials, and you found an assembly problem in 2 days. They were looking at the wrong thing, apparently. Martin picked up the report again. This is good work, Lucas, really good. I'll have Rachel verify it, but if you're right, and I think you are, this saves us a lot of money and a lot of headaches with the client. Lucas felt something unclench in his chest. So I handled it? You handled it. Martin stood and held out his hand. Welcome to the team, for real this time. Lucas shook his hand, and for the first time since he'd walked into this building, he felt like maybe he actually belonged here. Tuesday morning, Rachel stopped at his desk. I reviewed your valve report. Lucas looked up. And? You were right. We tested the assembly procedure and confirmed the torque sequencing issue. She paused. It was good work. Thanks. Don't let it go to your head. You got lucky. But she said it with less ice than before. Maybe not friendly, but not hostile either. Progress. The weeks started to blur together in a way that felt almost normal. Lucas would drop Emma at school, drive to Sterling Heights, spend 8 hours diagnosing problems that Martin's team couldn't crack, then drive home and make dinner and help with homework. Weekends he'd run the garage with Kyle, keeping his hand at the work that still felt more natural than anything he did in the lab. He solved a bearing failure that had stumped the team for a month, diagnosed a wiring harness problem that was causing intermittent shorts, found a manufacturing defect in a batch of aluminum housings that would have failed spectacularly if they'd made it to customers. And slowly, grudgingly, the engineering team started to accept him. Not as one of them, he'd never be that, but as someone who could do the work, someone who belonged at the table. It was the middle of November when everything changed. Lucas was in the lab testing a failed transmission component when Martin's office door flew open hard enough to bang against the wall. Martin stormed out, face red, phone pressed to his ear. I don't care what the data says. We need to halt production until we figure out what's... No, listen to me. He saw Lucas and pointed. My office. Now. Lucas set down the component and followed. Martin slammed his office door. We have a problem. A big one. Martin pulled up something on his computer. You know the Series 7 actuator assembly? The one we supply to Bachmann Automotive? That's the one. They just reported a field failure. Complete system shutdown on one of their test vehicles. If this is what I think it is, we're looking at a recall of every unit we've delivered in the last 6 months. That's 40,000 assemblies at $1,200 each. Lucas did the math in his head. $48 million. What do you need me to do? The failed unit is being overnighted here. It'll arrive tomorrow morning. I need you to tear it apart and tell me exactly what went wrong and why. Martin's phone buzzed. He ignored it. And Lucas? This one matters. If we can't give Bachmann an answer and a fix in 72 hours, they're going to pull the contract. That's $200 million in annual revenue. Lucas felt the weight of that number settle on his shoulders. I'll figure it out. You better. Martin's phone buzzed again. This time he answered it. Reeves? Yeah, I know. I've got someone on it. Lucas left the office and went back to his desk. Around him, the engineering floor buzzed with the news. 40,000 units, $48 million. $200 million in revenue. No pressure. His phone vibrated. Text from Emma. Can Sadie sleep over Friday? Lucas typed back. We'll see. Busy week. That means no. That means we'll see. He put the phone away and stared at his computer screen. Somewhere in the database was information about the Series 7 actuator. Specs, test data, previous failures. He just had to find it before everything fell apart. The failed actuator arrived at 7:30 Wednesday morning in a foam-lined case marked urgent. Lucas was already in the lab, third cup of coffee going cold on the bench beside him. when the courier brought it in. He signed for it without looking up from the technical specs he'd been studying since 5 a.m. $200 million riding on whatever was inside that case. No pressure. The actuator itself was smaller than he'd expected, about the size of a shoebox, brushed aluminum housing, electrical connectors on one end, mounting brackets on the other. Clean, precise, exactly the kind of component Voss Industries had built its reputation on. Except this one had failed, completely, and nobody knew why. Lucas started with the basics. Visual inspection first, looking for obvious damage, cracks, burns, deformation. Nothing. The housing was pristine, facite. He checked the electrical connectors. Clean, no corrosion. Mounting points showed normal wear, nothing excessive. He photographed everything, documenting each angle, then carefully removed the housing bolts. The internal components came into view. Servo motor, gear train, position sensors, control board. Everything looked exactly the way it should, which meant the problem was hiding. Lucas spent the next 4 hours disassembling every piece, measuring tolerances, checking resistances, comparing values to the spec sheets. The servo motor tested good. The gear train showed minimal wear. The sensors read within acceptable ranges. By noon, he had a workbench covered in components and exactly 0 answers. Martin appeared in the lab doorway. Well, still looking. Lucas, I've got Bachman's VP calling me every 2 hours asking for an update. I need something to tell him. Tell him I'm working on it. That's not good enough. Martin walked over to the bench. What have you found so far? Nothing wrong. Everything tests good. Then why did it fail? That's what I'm trying to figure out. Lucas picked up the control board, turning it over in his hands. Something made this unit shut down completely. But it's not mechanical, it's not electrical, and it's not wear-related. So what's left? Lucas stared at the board. Small, dense, covered in components he could identify but didn't fully understand. Resistors, capacitors, integrated circuits. The brain of the actuator, the thing that made it respond to commands and adjust position. Software, he said. What? The control board. It's got firmware, right? Programming that tells it how to operate? Yeah, but we don't write that in-house. We license it from a third-party vendor. It's been tested extensively. Can I see the code? Martin hesitated. Lucas, you're not a software engineer. I know, but I can read logic. And if the hardware's fine, the problem has to be in the software. Martin pulled out his phone and made a call. Rachel, I need you in the lab. Bring the firmware documentation for the Series 7 actuator. He hung up. She'll be here in 5 minutes. But Lucas, if this is a wild goose chase, it's not. Rachel showed up with a 3-ring binder thick enough to stop a bullet. She set it on the bench with a thud and looked at Lucas. Martin says you think it's a software problem. Maybe. Based on what? A hunch? Based on the fact that everything else checks out. Lucas opened the binder. Pages and pages of code printouts, flowcharts, logic diagrams. Walk me through how this thing works. Rachel sighed but pulled up a stool. Fine. The actuator receives position commands from the vehicle's control system. The firmware processes those commands and drives the servo motor to the correct position. There are safety checks built in. If it detects an out-of-range command or a sensor fault, it goes into fail-safe mode and shuts down. What's an out-of-range command? Anything outside the actuator's physical limits. Let's say the vehicle asks it to move to a position that would damage the mechanism. The firmware says no and shuts down instead. Lucas flipped through the binder, looking at the safety check routines. What defines out of range? Upper and lower bounds. They're set in the configuration parameters. Rachel pointed to a table in the documentation. See? Maximum extension is 247 millimeters. Minimum is 12 millimeters. Anything outside that range triggers the failsafe. And those numbers are based on the physical design? Right. The actuator physically can't move beyond those points without breaking. Lucas pulled up the test data from the failed unit. Position sensor readings, command history, everything the control board had logged before it died. There. In the milliseconds before shutdown, the vehicle had sent a position command of 251 millimeters, 4 millimeters over the maximum limit. This triggered the failsafe. Lucas said, pointing at the screen. Rachel leaned in. Okay, so the vehicle sent a bad command. That's not our problem. That's Bachman's control system. Except it's not a bad command. Lucas pulled up the technical specifications for Bachman's vehicle. Look, their design requires a maximum extension of 250 millimeters. Our actuator spec sheet says we can handle up to 247. They're asking for 3 millimeters more than we promised we could deliver. Rachel went pale. That can't be right. We would have caught that in the design review. Unless nobody checked. Lucas started pulling up more documentation, design reviews, test reports, approval signatures. Who signed off on this? Rachel took the binder and flipped to the approval page. Her face went from pale to gray. Kenneth Marsh. The name hit the room like a bomb. Kenneth Marsh, CFO. The guy who sat 2 seats from Naomi at board meetings and smiled like he owned the place. Martin grabbed the binder. When did he sign this? 18 months ago, right after we got the Bachman contract. Rachel's voice was shaky. But Kenneth's not an engineer. He shouldn't have been anywhere near technical approvals. Unless he wanted to make sure something got approved that wouldn't pass a real review. Lucas felt pieces clicking together in his head. What if this wasn't an accident? What if someone changed the specs to make it look like we could meet Bachman's requirements when we couldn't? That's fraud, Martin said. That's deliberate sabotage. That's 200 million reasons to make a contract happen even if we couldn't deliver. Lucas looked at them both. We need to see the original specifications, the ones before Kenneth signed off. Martin was already on his phone. IT? I need access to archived engineering files, 18 months back. Series 7 actuator development, everything. He listened, then said, I don't care if it's backed up to tape. Get it restored. Now. It took it 3 hours to pull the archived files. Lucas spent those 3 hours in Martin's office with Rachel, going through every piece of documentation they could find about the Bachman contract. The timeline was damning. Bachman had released their requirements in March. Voss Industries had submitted a proposal in April saying they could meet those requirements. The contract was signed in May, and in June, right after the ink was dry, Kenneth Marsh had signed off on specs that didn't match what they'd promised. The original files came through at 4:30. Martin pulled them up on his computer, and Lucas crowded in to look. There it was. The original specification sheet dated March, written by Rachel's team. Maximum extension, 247 millimeters. A note in red text. Does not meet Bachman requirement of 250 millimeters. Recommend design modification or contract renegotiation. And then a second version dated June with Kenneth's signature. Maximum extension, 250 millimeters. The red warning note was gone. The design specs were identical except for that one number. Someone had changed the documentation to make it look like the actuator could do something it couldn't. And when Bachman's vehicles had asked for that extra 3 millimeters, the actuators had done exactly what they were designed to do, shut down to prevent damage. He falsified the specs, Rachel said quietly. Kenneth made it look like we could deliver when we couldn't, got the contract signed, and buried the evidence. Why? Martin asked. What does he gain from setting us up to fail? Lucas thought about it. What happens if we lose the Bachman contract? Revenue drops? Stock price tanks? We'd probably have to do layoffs. Martin's eyes widened. And if someone knew that was coming to Saya, they could short the stock, make millions when the price drops. Lucas felt sick. He's betting against his own company. Martin stood up. We need to go to Naomi, now. We need proof first, Rachel said. Real proof. Financial records showing Kenneth shorted the stock. Communication records showing he knew about the spec change. Otherwise, it's just our word against a CFO's. So we get proof. Martin looked at Lucas. Can you write up everything you found? The failure analysis, the spec discrepancy, all of it? Yeah. Do it tonight. Rachel, you pull together the documentation trail. Original specs, modified specs, Kenneth's signature. I'll get IT to search email archives for anything related to this contract. Martin's jaw was set. We're taking this to Naomi tomorrow morning, and we're bringing everything. Jityi. Lucas worked until midnight in the lab, writing up the failure analysis with the kind of detail that would make a jury understand it. He documented every test, every measurement, every piece of evidence that proved the actuators had failed because they'd been asked to do something they were never designed to do. And then he documented how Kenneth Marsh had covered it up. By the time he drove home, it was 1 a.m. Emma was asleep. Mrs. Chen had left a note saying she'd fed Emma dinner and helped with homework. Lucas stood in Emma's doorway for a long moment, watching her sleep, letting the simple reality of her ground him. Tomorrow, he was going to walk into Naomi Voss's office and accuse her CFO of fraud. If he was wrong, his career was over. If he was right, he'd just painted a target on his back. But the evidence didn't lie. And Lucas had spent 14 years trusting evidence over everything else. He went to bed at 1:30 and didn't sleep at all. Martin called an emergency meeting for 8 a.m. Naomi's office, executive level, attendance mandatory. Lucas showed up in his work clothes. He didn't own anything better, carrying a folder full of printouts and a thumb drive with all the digital evidence. Rachel was already there, looking like she hadn't slept either. Martin arrived 5 minutes later with someone from IT, a nervous kid named David who kept adjusting his glasses. Naomi's assistant showed them into the conference room adjacent to her office. Glass walls, massive table, chairs that probably cost more than Lucas's truck. Naomi was already seated at the head of the table, wearing a charcoal suit that looked like it could cut glass. Kenneth Marsh sat 2 seats down, perfectly groomed, perfectly calm. "This better be important," Naomi said. "I canceled 2 meetings for this." Yes. Martin set his briefcase on the table. "It's important. Lucas, show them what you found." Lucas stood, feeling every eye in the room on him. He opened his folder and pulled out the first document, a photo of the failed actuator. The Series 7 actuator that failed in Bachmann's test vehicle shut down because it received a position command outside its design parameters. The vehicle asked it to extend to 251 millimeters. Our actuator's maximum safe extension is 247 millimeters. The firmware did exactly what it was supposed to do. It went into fail-safe mode to prevent mechanical damage. Kenneth leaned forward. "So Bachmann sent a faulty command. That's their control system's fault, not ours. Except Bachmann's requirements specified a maximum extension of 250 millimeters. They designed their vehicle around that number. We told them we could meet it." Lucas pulled out the next document. "But we can't. The physical design of our actuator tops out at 247. It always has." He laid out the original spec sheet, the one with Rachel's warning note, then the modified version with Kenneth's signature. Someone changed the documentation after the contract was signed, made it look like we could deliver 250 millimeters when we couldn't. And that someone was you. He looked directly at Kenneth. The room went silent. Kenneth's expression didn't change, but Lucas saw his jaw tighten. "That's a serious accusation," Kenneth said quietly. "Do you have any proof I did this intentionally?" "Yes." David from IT stood up, hands shaking slightly. "I pulled your email archives. 3 weeks after the contract was signed, you sent an email to a stockbroker setting up a short position on Voss Industries stock. 2 million shares. He put a printout on the table. Lucas couldn't read it from where he stood, but he saw Naomi pick it up, her face unreadable. "You bet against your own company," Martin said. "You falsified specs to get a contract we couldn't fulfill, then positioned yourself to profit when it fell apart. That's fraud, Kenneth. That's criminal." Kenneth stood slowly. "This is absurd. I signed off on specs that my engineering team provided. If there was an error, it's their fault, not mine. And the stock position was a hedge, perfectly legal." "A hedge." Naomi's voice cut through the room like a knife. "You shorted 2 million shares of the company I built. 2 million shares that would have netted you $40 million if we lost the Bachmann contract." She set down the printout. "That's not a hedge. That's sabotage." "Naomi, you're listening to a mechanic and a junior engineer who are trying to cover up their own mistakes. I'm listening to 3 people who have evidence, documentation, emails, financial records." Naomi stood. "I'm also listening to someone who's been with this company for 12 years and who I thought I could trust. So tell me, Kenneth, right now, did you falsify those specifications?" Kenneth looked at her. For the first time since Lucas had entered the room, the mask slipped. Just for a second, but it was enough. It was supposed to work, Kenneth said quietly. The actuator design was close enough. I thought we could make small modifications, deliver something that met their requirements, and nobody would know the difference. But you didn't make modifications, Rachel said. You just changed the paperwork and hoped nobody would notice. The engineering team said modifications would take 6 months and cost $2 million. We didn't have 6 months. Bachmann was ready to sign, and if we told them we couldn't meet their specs, they would have gone with Hartman Industries instead. Kenneth's voice rose. I was protecting this company, protecting our market position. You were protecting your bonus, Naomi said. CFOs get performance incentives based on revenue. You wanted that contract signed no matter what it took. And you wanted Bachmann's business just as badly. Don't pretend you would have walked away from $200 million. I would have if we couldn't deliver. Naomi's voice was ice. I've built this company on one principle, Kenneth. We don't lie to our clients. We don't promise things we can't deliver. And we sure as hell don't commit fraud to make our numbers. She pressed a button on the conference room phone. Security? I need an escort to the executive level. Immediately. Kenneth went pale. Naomi, wait. You're fired, effective immediately. Security will escort you from the building. You have 10 minutes to collect personal items from your office. Nothing electronic. Nothing proprietary. She looked at him with an expression that could have frozen nitrogen. And Kenneth? I'm forwarding all of this to the SEC and the district attorney. You're going to need a lawyer. Security arrived. 2 large men in Voss Industries uniforms. Kenneth looked at Naomi one last time, opened his mouth like he wanted to say something, then closed it and walked out. The door shut behind him. Naomi sat back down and looked at Lucas, Martin, and Rachel. Thank you. All 3 of you. If this had gone to full production, if Bachmann had deployed 40,000 units that would have failed in the field. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. What happens now? Martin asked. Now I call Bachmann's VP and tell him the truth, that we had a fraudulent executive who falsified specifications, that we've terminated him and are cooperating with law enforcement, and that we're redesigning the Series 7 to actually meet their requirements. Naomi stood. It'll cost us the 6 months and $2 million Kenneth was trying to avoid, but we'll deliver what we promised, even if it's late. Will Bachmann stay with us? Rachel asked. I don't know. But they might respect us more for admitting the problem than if we'd tried to hide it. Naomi looked at Lucas. You saved this company. Again. First my car, then this. I'm starting to think I should have hired you years ago. I was just doing my job. No, you were doing the right thing. There's a difference. She paused. I'm authorizing a bonus for all 3 of you. Lucas, yours is $200,000. Martin, Rachel, $50,000 each. You've earned it. Lucas felt the number hit him like a physical thing. $200,000. More money than he'd ever imagined having. Thank you, he managed. Don't thank me. You did the work. Naomi picked up the phone. Now get back to your departments. We've got a crisis to manage and a product to redesign. I want a preliminary timeline for the Series 7 modifications on my desk by end of week. They filed out of the conference room. Lucas walked back to the engineering floor in a daze, Rachel beside him. That was insane, she said quietly. Yeah. You know he's going to go to prison, right? SEC doesn't mess around with stock fraud. Good. Rachel stopped at her desk. Lucas? I'm sorry I gave you a hard time when you started. I was wrong. You're good at this. Thanks. No, I mean it. You see things the rest of us miss. You think differently. That matters. She sat down. I'm glad you're here. Lucas nodded and walked to his own desk. He sat down, logged into his computer and stared at the screen without seeing it. $200,000. He could pay off the truck, fix the water stain in the ceiling, put money away for Emma's future, maybe even take a vacation, something they'd never done. His phone buzzed, text from Emma's school, parent-teacher conference request. Mrs. Rodriguez would like to meet next week to discuss Emma's progress. Lucas typed back, I'll be there. What day works? The response came fast. Thursday at 3 p.m. Perfect. See you then. He put the phone down and went back to staring at his computer. Around him, the engineering floor hummed with normal work. People designing components, running tests, solving problems that didn't involve fraud or sabotage. Just engineering, just the work. Lucas pulled up the Series 7 files and started reading through the design specs, thinking about how they'd need to modify the mechanism to get those extra 3 millimeters of extension. It'd be tricky. They'd probably need to redesign the gear train, maybe change the servo motor specs. But it was doable. Everything was doable if you took it apart piece by piece and figured out how it actually worked. That's what Lucas had learned in 14 years of fixing broken things. Nothing was unfixable. You just had to be patient enough to find the problem and stubborn enough to solve it. His phone buzzed again. This time a text from a number he didn't recognize. "This is Naomi Voss. I don't usually text employees, but I wanted to tell you something privately. What you did today took courage. Most people would have stayed quiet to avoid making waves. You didn't. That says something about your character." Lucas stared at the message for a long moment. Then he typed back, "Just did what made sense." Her response was immediate. "That's exactly what I mean." Lucas put the phone in his pocket and got back to work. The Series 7 wasn't going to redesign itself, and Bachmann was waiting for answers. But for the first time since he'd walked into Voss Industries 3 months ago, Lucas felt like he actually belonged here. Not because of his salary or his title or the bonus that would clear in a few days, but because he'd done something that mattered. He'd found the truth when it was buried, and he'd spoken up when staying quiet would have been easier. That was worth more than any amount of money, though the money definitely didn't hurt. The rest of November passed in a controlled crisis. The engineering team worked 12-hour days redesigning the Series 7 actuator, running simulations, testing prototypes. Lucas was in the middle of it, his input carrying weight now that he'd proven he could see what others missed. Rachel became something close to a friend. They'd eat lunch together, argue about design approaches, push each other toward better solutions. Josh kept bringing Lucas coffee and asking questions about how he'd figured out the fraud, like Lucas was some kind of detective instead of just a guy who paid attention. Martin loosened up too. Still demanding, still sharp, but there was respect there now. He'd ask Lucas's opinion on problems, actually listen to the answers, implement solutions that came from a guy with no degree and 14 years of grease under his fingernails. And Naomi, Lucas barely saw her. She was managing the fallout from Kenneth's termination, dealing with the SEC investigation, keeping Bachmann from walking away. But every few days he'd get a text. Nothing personal, just updates or questions about the redesign. He never texted back more than necessary. She was still his boss, still the CEO of a billion-dollar company, still living in a world Lucas didn't understand and never would. But sometimes late at night, when Emma was asleep and the house was quiet, he'd read those texts and wonder what it meant that Naomi Voss took time out of her day to send them. Probably nothing. Probably just good management. The parent-teacher conference was scheduled for Thursday at 3. Lucas left work early, drove to Emma's school, and sat in one of those tiny chairs designed for 8-year-olds while Mrs. Rodriguez pulled out Emma's progress reports. "Emma's doing wonderfully," Mrs. Rodriguez said. "Her reading comprehension is above grade level. Her math has improved significantly since the start of the year, and she's a joy to have in class." "That's great to hear." "There is one thing I wanted to mention, though." Mrs. Rodriguez's expression shifted slightly. "Emma's been asking a lot of questions lately about families, specifically about mothers." Lucas felt his stomach tighten. "What kind of questions?" Why some kids have moms and she doesn't. Whether her mom is ever coming back? Normal questions for a child her age, but more frequent than usual. Mrs. Rodriguez leaned forward. "Has something changed at home? Something that might be making her think about this more?" Lucas thought about the texts he'd been getting, the late nights working, the distraction he'd been trying to hide. "Work's been busy," he said. "I've been distracted. Maybe she's picking up on that." Kids are perceptive. They notice when their parents are stressed. Mrs. Rodriguez smiled gently. "I'm not worried about Emma. She's resilient, well-adjusted, clearly loved. I just wanted you to know she's processing some things. I'll talk to her. Make sure she knows I'm here. That's all she needs." Mrs. Rodriguez stood. "Thank you for coming in, Mr. Hale. Emma's lucky to have you." Lucas drove home thinking about what Mrs. Rodriguez had said. Emma asking about her mother. Emma wondering if she'd ever come back. Sarah had been gone for 8 years. Emma didn't even remember her. She'd been 2 months old when Sarah left. But lately, Lucas had noticed Emma watching other kids with their moms at school pickup. Noticed her getting quiet when TV shows had mother-daughter scenes. He thought she was fine with it just being the two of them. Maybe he'd been wrong. That night after dinner, Lucas sat down next to Emma on the couch. "Hey, kiddo, can we talk about something?" Emma looked up from her book. "Am I in trouble?" "No, I just want to check in, see how you're doing." "I'm fine. Mrs. Rodriguez said you've been asking questions about moms, about your mom." Emma's expression closed off slightly. "It's not a big deal. Pásame." "It is if you're thinking about it." Lucas turned to face her. "You can ask me anything, you know that, right? About your mom, about why she left, anything. Why did she leave?" The question hung in the air. Lucas had known it was coming eventually. Every kid asked eventually. She wasn't ready to be a mom. She was young and scared, and she thought the best thing for you was to leave you with me. It was the simplest version of a complicated truth. It wasn't about you. "Emma, you didn't do anything wrong." "Do you think she ever thinks about me?" "I don't know. Maybe." "Do you think she'll come back?" Lucas felt something twist in his chest. "I don't know that either, kiddo, but I know this. You've got me, and Mrs. Chen, and all your friends. You've got people who love you and who aren't going anywhere." Emma was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Sadie's mom asked me if I wanted to go to her house for Thanksgiving. She said you're probably busy with work, and I could come over. What did you tell her?" "What?" "I said I'd ask you." Emma looked at him. "But I don't want to go. I want to have Thanksgiving here, with you." Lucas pulled her into a hug. "Then that's what we'll do. Just you and me and the worst turkey I've ever cooked." Emma laughed against his shoulder. "It's not that bad." "It's pretty bad." "Okay, it's kind of bad." They sat there for a while, and Lucas thought about how simple it was sometimes. Just showing up, just being there, just making sure Emma knew she was wanted. Everything else was complicated. But that part was easy. His phone buzzed. Text from Naomi. "Board meeting tomorrow at 2 p.m. I'd like you to present the Series 7 redesign progress. Can you do that?" Lucas stared at the message. A board meeting, with actual board members. People who made decisions worth millions of dollars. He typed back, "I'm not really a presentation guy." Her response? "You exposed fraud and saved a $200 million contract. You can handle a presentation. I'll have Rachel help you prep." Lucas sighed and put the phone away. Emma looked at him. "Work stuff?" "Yeah, big meeting tomorrow." "You'll be great." She said it with the absolute confidence of an 8-year-old who thought her dad could do anything. Lucas wished he had half that confidence himself. But he'd figure it out. Same way he figured out everything else. One piece at a time until it made sense. The envelope arrived at Lucas's house on a Tuesday morning, 3 weeks after he'd exposed Kenneth Marsh and saved Voss Industries from collapse. He was making breakfast, scrambled eggs and toast, nothing fancy, when he heard the mail slot clack. Emma was already at the table, working through her cereal with the single-minded focus of an 8-year-old who had exactly 12 minutes before they needed to leave for school. Lucas walked to the front door and picked up the mail. Bills, mostly. A coupon for an oil change place that would go out of business in 6 months. And a thick manila envelope with a law firm's return address. His stomach dropped before his brain could catch up. He knew that firm. Patterson and Cross. The same lawyers who'd handled Sarah's parents' estate. The same lawyers who'd sent him exactly 1 letter in the 8 years since Sarah had left. "Dad, we're going to be late." Lucas shoved the envelope in his jacket pocket. "Coming." He drove Emma to school on autopilot, kissed her goodbye, watched her run across the parking lot to where Sadie was waiting. Then he sat in the truck in the empty lot and pulled out the envelope. His hands shook as he opened it. The letter inside was formal, clinical, legal language that danced around what it was actually saying, but the core message hit him like a freight train. Petition for custody modification. Sarah Hale, petitioner. Grounds. Improve financial circumstances in stable home environment. Hearing scheduled for December 18th. Lucas read it 3 times. Then he pulled out his phone and called the only lawyer he knew, Jim Hendricks, who'd helped him with the garage's LLC paperwork 6 years ago. Jim answered on the fourth ring. Lucas? That you? I need help. Sarah's trying to take Emma. Silence. Then, come to my office. Now. Lucas drove to Cedar Falls in a fog. Jim's office was above the hardware store on Main Street, the same place it had been for 30 years. Jim himself looked like he hadn't changed in that time either. 60-something, graybeard, rumpled suit that had seen better days. He read the letter while Lucas sat across from him, hands clenched so tight his knuckles were white. Okay, Jim said finally. Talk me through this. When's the last time you heard from Sarah, Sa? 8 years ago, right after Emma was born. She left and never came back. No contact since then? No child support? No visits? Nothing? Nothing. And now she wants custody because she's got money and a stable home? Jim set down the letter. Lucas, I'm going to be straight with you. This is bad. How bad? She abandoned her kid for 8 years. That should count for something. But if she can prove she's turned her life around, if she's got resources you don't have. Jim rubbed his face. Family court cares about one thing, what's best for the child. And sometimes judges think money equals best. Emma's happy. She's got friends. She's doing good in school. I believe you, but you're going to have to prove it. And you're going to need a better lawyer than me. Jim pulled out a business card. Catherine Walsh, family law specialist. She's expensive, but she's good. Lucas took the card. How expensive? Retainer's probably 10 grand. Total cost could be 30, 40, depending on how long it drags out. $10,000. Lucas thought about his bank account. The money from Voss Industries had helped, sure. He'd paid off some debts, fixed the truck, bought Emma new clothes. But $10,000 was still $10,000. I'll figure it out. Lucas. Jim's voice was gentle. Don't wait. Call Catherine today. This hearing is less than a month away. Lucas nodded and stood. His legs felt like they belonged to someone else. He made it to his truck before the shaking started. Then he sat there in the parking lot above the hardware store and let himself fall apart for exactly 2 minutes. That's all he allowed himself. 2 minutes of pure panic and rage and terror at the thought of losing Emma. Then he pulled himself together, started the truck, and drove to work. He didn't tell anyone at Voss Industries. Not Martin, not Josh, not Rachel. He showed up, did his job, diagnosed problems, and wrote reports and pretended everything was fine. But at night, after Emma went to bed, he'd pull out that letter and read it again. And again. Looking for some loophole, some way out, some proof that this was all a mistake. There wasn't one. Catherine Walsh's office was in the city, 23rd floor of a building that made Voss Industries look modest. Lucas sat in her waiting room on Thursday afternoon, having burned a personal day to make the appointment. Catherine was younger than he expected, maybe 40, sharp suit, sharper eyes. She read the letter while he sat across from her, trying not to fidget. Okay, she said. Let's talk about Sarah. What's her situation? I don't know. We haven't spoken in 8 years. The petition says improve financial circumstances and stable home environment. My guess is she got married or landed a good job. Maybe both. Catherine made notes on a legal pad. What about you? Income, housing, support system? Lucas told her. The garage, the Voss Industries job, Mrs. Chen, Emma's life in Cedar Falls. That's good. Stable employment, good community ties, involved parent. Catherine set down her pen. But here's the problem. Sarah's going to argue that she's changed, that she deserves a second chance, that Emma would have opportunities with her that she wouldn't have with you. Emma doesn't even know her, which we'll use. But Sarah's lawyers will counter that it's never too late to build a relationship. Catherine leaned forward. Lucas, I'm going to be honest. These cases are hard. Judges don't like taking kids from their primary caregiver, but they also believe in redemption. If Sarah presents well, if she's got resources and a compelling story about why she left and why she's back now, what are my chances? 60-40 in your favor. Maybe 70-30 if Emma's old enough to express a preference and she's articulate about wanting to stay with you. Muskie, 60-40. Those weren't the odds Lucas wanted to hear. How much is this going to cost? 10,000 retainer. Total cost depends on how far this goes. If we settle, maybe 15. If it goes to trial, could be 40 or more. Lucas felt sick. And if I can't afford that? Then you get a court-appointed attorney who's handling 100 other cases and won't have time to give this the attention it needs. Catherine's expression softened. Look, I know this is scary, but you're not without options. You've been Emma's sole parent for 8 years. That matters. We just need to prove that staying with you is what's best for her. Lucas signed the retainer agreement and wrote a check that emptied half his savings account. Then he drove back to Cedar Falls and tried to figure out how to tell his 8-year-old daughter that the mother who'd abandoned her wanted her back. He didn't tell her, not yet. Catherine had advised waiting until they knew more about Sarah's angle. No point in scaring Emma before they had to. But Emma knew something was wrong. Kids always did. Dad, are you mad at me? They were eating dinner, spaghetti, Emma's favorite. Lucas looked up from his plate. What? No. Why would I be mad at you? You've been weird all week, like quiet weird, not normal weird. Lucas set down his fork. I'm not mad at you, kiddo. I've just got some stuff going on with work. Is it bad stuff? It's complicated stuff. But it's not your fault, and I'm not mad at you. He reached across the table and squeezed her hand. Okay? Isto. Was ball. Okay. Emma went back to her spaghetti, but Lucas could see she didn't entirely believe him. That night, after she was asleep, Lucas sat at the kitchen table with a beer he wasn't drinking and Catherine's business card in front of him. His phone buzzed. Text from Naomi. Available tomorrow at 2 p.m. Need to discuss something. Lucas stared at the message. He hadn't spoken to Naomi directly since the board meeting where he'd exposed Kenneth. She'd sent a company-wide email thanking him for his work, but no personal contact. He typed back, I can make that work. Her response came immediately. My office, don't be late. The next afternoon, Lucas took an extended lunch and drove to the city. The receptionist on the 40th floor waved him through without comment, and Lucas knocked on Naomi's office door. Come in. It's... She was standing at the window when he entered, looking out at the city spread below like a game board. She didn't turn around. Close the door. Lucas closed it. The office was exactly as he remembered. Minimalist, expensive, designed to intimidate. You saved my company, Naomi said, still facing the window. Kenneth's fraud would have destroyed us. Instead, we're stronger than we've ever been. Stock price is up 30%. The board is actually competent now. We just landed a contract with Bachman that's worth $500 million over 5 years. That's good? It's more than good. It's everything I've worked for since I took over from my father. She turned to face him. And I owe it to you. Lucas shifted his weight. I was just doing my job. No, you went beyond your job. You risked your position, your reputation, potentially your career to tell me something I needed to hear. She walked to her desk. That's rare. People don't usually risk anything for someone else. You gave me a chance when nobody else would. Seemed fair to return the favor. Naomi studied him. Her expression was unreadable, the same ice-cold mask she always wore. But something in her eyes was different, softer maybe, or just less hostile. I want to make your position permanent, she said. Full-time diagnostic specialist, same salary, better benefits. And I'm authorizing a bonus for your work on the Bachman crisis, $200,000. Lucas felt the words hit him like a physical thing. 200,000, yes. Naomi sat down. You earned it. Without your work, we'd have lost that contract and probably several others. This is appropriate compensation. Totasan some set $200,000 on top of his salary. More money than Lucas had made in his entire life combined. He thought about Emma, the custody hearing, Catherine's fees, the future he'd been trying to build on hope and duct tape. I accept, he said. Good. Naomi pulled out a folder. There's paperwork. HR will process everything by Monday. The bonus will be in your account by Wednesday. Lucas took the folder. Thank you. Don't thank me. You did the work. She turned back to her computer. One more thing. I'm hosting a dinner next month for key executives and contributors. You're invited. It's formal, so you'll need a suit. I don't really do formal dinners. Try it. You do now. It's not optional. She glanced at him. And Lucas? Bring someone if you want, partner, friend, whoever. I've got a daughter. I know, I read your file. Naomi's expression didn't change. Bring her if she'd enjoy it, or don't. Either way, you're expected to attend. Lucas nodded and turned to leave. He was at the door when Naomi spoke again. Lucas? He looked back. I don't trust easily. I never have. But I'm starting to think I was right about you. She paused. Don't prove me wrong. I won't. He left the office feeling like he'd just been handed a life preserver while drowning. $200,000. Enough to pay Catherine, cover any legal fees, set aside money for Emma's future, enough to fight and win. That night he called Catherine and told her about the bonus. She was quiet for a moment, then said, That changes things. With that kind of financial security, we can argue you're providing everything Sarah could provide, plus stability and continuity. This is good, Lucas. Really good. So what do? We prepare. I need you to document everything about Emma's life. School records, medical records, testimonials from teachers and neighbors. Anything that shows you're a good parent and she's thriving with you. How long do I have? 3 weeks until the hearing. Let's get started. Lucas spent every spare moment gathering documentation. Report cards showing Emma's grades, mostly B's, a few A's, 1 C in math she'd worked hard to bring up. Medical records from doctor. Patterson showing regular checkups, vaccinations up to date, no major health issues. A letter from Emma's teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, talking about what a sweet, engaged student she was. He asked Mrs. Chen if she'd be willing to testify. She said yes without hesitation. He asked Jim Hendricks to write a character reference. Jim said he'd have it done by Monday. And through it all, Emma had no idea her world was about to be turned upside down. The Friday before the hearing, Catherine called. We need to talk. Sarah's lawyers just filed an amended petition. Lucas's stomach clenched. What does that mean? It means they're adding information. She's married now, some guy named Richard Calloway. He's a VP at a pharmaceutical company. They've got a house in Westchester, annual income north of $600,000, and they're pregnant. Lucas sat down hard. She's having another baby? Due in March. They're arguing that Emma would have a sibling, a 2-parent household, and financial resources that would provide opportunities you can't match. Catherine's voice was calm, professional. It's a strong position, but it's not insurmountable. What do I do? You show up Monday morning ready to fight, wear a suit, be respectful, answer questions honestly. And most importantly, don't lose your temper. They're going to paint you as unstable, maybe even negligent. You need to stay calm and prove them wrong. I can do that. Good. I'll see you Monday at 8. Courthouse, 3rd floor. Don't be late. Lucas hung up and stared at his phone. Sarah was married, having another baby, living in a house in Westchester with a husband who made more in a year than Lucas would make in a decade, and she wanted Emma back. He walked to Emma's room and stood in the doorway, watching her sleep. She was sprawled across the bed the way she always was, blankets twisted around her legs, her stuffed rabbit clutched against her chest. 8 years. He'd been doing this for 8 years. Every midnight fever, every scraped knee, every bad dream and school project and parent-teacher conference. He'd shown up for all of it. Sarah had shown up for none of it. And now she wanted to take Emma away because she had money and a husband and a baby on the way? Lucas felt rage burn through him, hot and clean and righteous. But underneath it was something worse. Fear, cold, sick fear that he was going to lose. The weekend passed in a blur. Lucas bought a suit at a discount store in the city. Nothing fancy, but it fit and it was better than showing up in jeans. He rehearsed answers to questions Catherine had prepared him for. He tried not to think about the fact that in 48 hours, everything might change. Sunday night, Emma asked why he was ironing his clothes. I've got a meeting tomorrow, important one. For work? Sort of. Lucas focused on the shirt collar, getting the crease just right. Hey kiddo, you know I love you, right? Emma looked up from her homework. Yeah, Dad, I know. And nothing's gonna change that. No matter what happens, you're my kid and I love you. You're being weird again. I know. Lucas set down the iron and pulled her into a hug. Just remember that, okay? Okay, but show. She went back to her homework. and Lucas went back to ironing his shirt and trying not to think about what tomorrow might bring. The courthouse was exactly what Lucas expected. Cold marble floors, fluorescent lights, the smell of old paper, and anxiety. Catherine met him outside courtroom 3C, looking every bit the high-powered attorney in her tailored suit and expensive briefcase. Ready? No. Good. Honesty's important today. She led him into the courtroom. We're at the defendant's table. Sarah and her lawyers will be on the other side. Don't make eye contact. Don't react to anything they say. Just stay calm. Lucas sat down. The courtroom was smaller than he'd imagined, more like a conference room than the dramatic TV version he'd been picturing. But the judge's bench was real enough, high and imposing. The door opened behind him. Lucas didn't turn around, but he heard footsteps. 2 sets. Then voices, low and professional. Catherine leaned over. That's them. Lucas couldn't help it. He turned. Sarah sat at the plaintiff's table with a man in an expensive suit who had to be Richard. She looked different than Lucas remembered. Older, obviously. 8 years would do that. But also polished in a way she never had been. Professional clothes, perfect hair, makeup that probably cost more than his monthly grocery bill. She glanced over and their eyes met. For a second, Lucas saw something flicker in her expression. Guilt, maybe. Or regret. But then it was gone, replaced by the same determined set to her jaw she'd had when she told him she was leaving. All rise. Everyone stood. The judge entered, a woman in her 50s, gray hair, the kind of face that had seen everything and wasn't impressed by any of it. Please be seated. We're here for a custody modification petition, Sarah Calloway versus Lucas Hale, regarding minor child Emma Hale. The judge looked at both tables. Ms. Walsh, you're representing the respondent? Catherine stood. Yes, Your Honor. And Mr. Brennan for the petitioner? Sarah's lawyer stood. He was tall, silver-haired, the kind of guy who probably charged $1,000 an hour. That's correct, Your Honor. All right, Mr. Brennan, since you filed the petition, you can start. Brennan stood and launched into his opening argument. He talked about Sarah's transformation, her stable marriage, her financial security. He painted a picture of a woman who'd made mistakes but had turned her life around and now wanted to give her daughter opportunities she'd never had. He didn't mention that she'd abandoned Emma 8 years ago. He framed it as Sarah being unable to provide adequate care at the time and making the difficult decision to ensure Emma's stability. Lucas wanted to stand up and call it what it was: abandonment. But Catherine had warned him, stay quiet, stay calm, don't react. Then it was Catherine's turn. She stood and faced the judge. Your Honor, this case is about one simple question. What's best for Emma Hale? And the answer is equally simple. Emma has lived with her father for her entire life. He has provided a stable, loving home. She's thriving in school. She has friends. She has a community that supports her. Uprooting her now, 8 years after Ms. Calloway chose to leave, would be devastating. Brennan objected. Your Honor, characterizing my client's departure as a choice is sustained. Ms. Walsh, keep your language neutral. Catherine nodded. Of course, Your Honor, the point remains. Emma's life is with her father. That's where she's happy, where she's stable, and where she should remain. The judge made notes. All right. Mr. Brennan, call your first witness. Brennan called Sarah. She took the stand, swore to tell the truth, and sat down with perfect posture. Brennan walked her through her story. The young pregnancy, the overwhelming stress, the decision to leave Emma with Lucas because she wasn't equipped to be a mother at that time. And now? Brennan asked. Are you equipped now? Yes. Sarah's voice was steady. I've spent the last 8 years building a life I can be proud of. I have a career, a supportive husband, a home, and I want to share that with my daughter. What kind of opportunities could you provide Emma that she doesn't currently have? Private school, music lessons, travel, a broader perspective on the world. Sarah looked at the judge. I'm not saying Lucas isn't a good father. I'm saying Emma deserves more than what one person can provide alone. Catherine cross-examined her, and it was surgical. Ms. Calloway, in the 8 years since you left, how many times have you contacted Emma? I didn't think it was appropriate. I didn't want to confuse her. So 0 times? Yes. How many birthday cards did you send? None. Christmas presents? No. Child support payments? Child. I wasn't in a position to. That's a no, correct? Sarah's jaw tightened. Correct. Us. So for 8 years, you had zero contact with your daughter. No financial support, no emotional support, nothing. And now you want custody because you have money? Brennan objected. The judge sustained it. But the damage was done. Then Lucas took the stand. Brennan went after him hard. Questioned his income, his education, his ability to provide the kind of future Sarah could offer. Lucas answered everything honestly, calmly, the way Catherine had coached him. Mr. Hale, you work at an auto shop, correct? I work as a diagnostic specialist at Voss Industries. I also own a garage. And your combined income? About $140,000 annually, plus a recent bonus. Brennan's eyebrows rose. That's significantly more than your previous tax return showed. I got promoted, and the bonus was for performance. Me, truant. Still, Ms. Calloway and her husband's combined income is over $600,000. Can you compete with that? I'm not trying to compete, I'm trying to raise my daughter. Lucas met Brennan's eyes. Money's important, but it's not everything. Catherine's redirect was simple. Lucas, tell the court about a typical day with Emma. He did. The morning routine, breakfast, driving to school, homework at the kitchen table, dinner together, reading before bed. The small, mundane details that made up a life. Why do you want custody to remain with you? Because she's my daughter, because I've been there for every moment of her life, because she's happy and safe and loved. Lucas's voice cracked. Because I can't imagine my life without her. The judge called a recess. Lucas and Catherine went to a conference room down the hall. How do you think it went? Lucas asked. Hard to say. The judge is playing it close. Catherine pulled out her notes. But you did well. You came across as genuine, committed. That matters. What about Sarah, Watts? She came across as polished and prepared, but also cold. Like this is about proving something rather than actually wanting to be a mother. Catherine looked at him. It's going to come down to what the judge thinks is best for Emma, and that's a coin flip. They went back into the courtroom. The judge reviewed her notes, asked a few clarifying questions, then sat back. I'm going to schedule a follow-up hearing in 2 weeks. Before then, I want a home study for both households. I also want to speak with Emma privately to get her perspective. She looked at both lawyers. This isn't a decision I'm making lightly. A child's welfare is at stake, and I need to be absolutely certain about what's in her best interest. The gavel came down. Court adjourned. Lucas stood on shaky legs. Catherine packed up her briefcase. 2 weeks. We used that time to prepare Emma for her conversation with the judge. She needs to be honest about what she wants. And if she says she wants to live with Sarah, she won't. You're her dad. You've been there her whole life. Catherine's expression softened. Trust that, Lucas. Trust what you've built with her. Lucas nodded. But as he walked out of the courthouse, he couldn't shake the feeling that everything was balanced on a knife's edge. And one wrong move would send it all crashing down. The 2 weeks before the follow-up hearing felt like living underwater. Everything moved slower, sounded muffled, looked distorted. Lucas went through the motions. Work, home, Emma. Repeat. But his brain was stuck on December 18th and what might happen when that gavel came down. Catherine had prepared Emma for her conversation with the judge. Nothing scary, she'd told Lucas. Just a chat about what Emma liked, where she felt safe, what she wanted. But Lucas knew judges asked harder questions than that. They had to. The home study had come and gone. A social worker named Patricia had spent 3 hours at Lucas's house, looking at Emma's room, checking the refrigerator, asking questions about routines and discipline and emergency contacts. She'd been professional, neutral, impossible to read. Lucas had no idea if his house, with its water-stained ceiling and secondhand furniture, measured up to whatever Sarah had in Westchester. Work was the only thing keeping him sane. The Series 7 redesign was progressing. They'd solved the extension problem by modifying the gear train and upgrading the servo motor. Bachmann had agreed to wait for the corrected units, impressed by Naomi's honesty about the fraud. The contract was saved, but Lucas couldn't enjoy the victory. Not with the custody hearing looming. It was Wednesday, 5 days before the hearing, when Naomi called him to her office. He took the elevator to the 40th floor, wondering if this was about work or something else. Naomi's texts had been more frequent lately, less formal. She'd asked about Emma once, after Lucas had mentioned the custody case in passing. He'd given her the basics, kept it brief. She hadn't pressed. The assistant waved him through. Naomi was at her desk, but she stood when he entered. Close the door. Lucas did. The office was dimmer than usual, the city lights outside brighter in contrast. It was almost 6. Most people had gone home. I read the court documents, Naomi said. Lucas felt his stomach drop. How did you, Catherine Walsh called me. Said she might need a character witness. Someone who could speak to your stability and work ethic. I told her I'd do it. Naomi walked to the window. But I wanted to hear it from you first. The whole story. There's not much to tell. Sarah left when Emma was a baby. Never came back. Never called. Now she's married and pregnant and wants custody. Why now? Catherine thinks it's about completing the picture. Sarah's got the husband, the house, the career. A kid makes it perfect. Lucas shoved his hands in his pockets. Or maybe she actually wants to be a mother? I don't know. Do you think Emma would be better off with her? The question caught Lucas off guard. No. But Sarah can give her things you can't. Private school, travel, opportunities. I can give her those things now. The bonus, the salary. I can afford that stuff if Emma wants it. That's not what I asked. Naomi turned to face him. I asked if you think Emma would be better off. Not financially. Actually better. Lucas thought about Emma sprawled on the couch reading, Emma doing homework at the kitchen table, Emma hugging him before school, and telling him about Marcus eating paste, small moments that added up to a life. No, he said again. She wouldn't be better, different maybe, but not better. Then fight for her. Naomi's voice was quiet, but firm. Don't let fear make you doubt what you know. You're a good father. Emma's lucky to have you. You don't know that. You've never even met her. I know you. That's enough. She pulled a folder from her desk. Catherine asked for documentation of your employment and income. I've prepared a letter as well. It states that you're a valued employee, that your position is permanent, and that Voss Industries considers you essential personnel. Lucas took the folder. Why are you doing this? Look, because it's the right thing to do. Naomi paused. And because you've done right by me. Multiple times. I believe in returning favors. This is more than a favor. Then consider it an investment. I don't want to lose you as an employee because you're too worried about your daughter to focus. She sat on the edge of her desk. Lucas, I've spent my entire adult life building this company. I sacrificed relationships, friendships, everything for it. And I don't regret that. This company is important. But watching you with Emma, the way you talk about her, it makes me wonder what I gave up to get here. You can still have that, kids, family, whatever you want. Can I? Naomi's smile was sad. I'm 34, married to my work, and I don't trust anyone enough to let them close. The window for normal life closed years ago. That's not true. Isn't it? She stood. But this isn't about me. It's about you and Emma. Take the letter. Win your case. Keep your daughter. Lucas looked at the folder in his hands, then at Naomi. For the first time since he'd met her, she looked vulnerable. Not weak, never weak, but human in a way he hadn't seen before. Thank you, he said. Don't thank me yet. Thank me after you win. The night before the hearing, Lucas couldn't sleep. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, running through everything Catherine had told him to say and not say. Be honest. Be calm. Don't get emotional. Let the facts speak. But facts were just facts. They didn't capture what it felt like to watch Emma take her first steps, or stay up all night when she had croup, or teach her to ride a bike. Facts didn't show the 1,000 tiny moments that made up being a parent. At 2 a.m., he gave up on sleep and went to Emma's room. She was curled up with her rabbit, peaceful in a way Lucas envied. He sat on the floor beside her bed and just watched her breathe. I'm not going to lose you, he whispered. I promise. Emma stirred but didn't wake. Lucas stayed there until dawn, making promises he hoped he could keep. The courtroom was fuller this time. Catherine sat beside Lucas, composed and ready. Across the aisle, Sarah and her lawyer looked equally prepared. But there was something else. Naomi Voss, sitting in the gallery behind Lucas, dressed in a dark suit that made her look like she'd walked out of a boardroom and into a courtroom without breaking stride. Lucas hadn't asked her to come, but seeing her there steadied something inside him. All rise. The judge entered. Same woman as before, same unreadable expression. She sat, reviewed her notes, then looked at both tables. I've reviewed the home studies, interviewed the child, and considered all submitted documentation. Before I issue my ruling, I want to hear closing statements from both sides. Mr. Brennan? Sarah's lawyer stood and delivered a polished argument about redemption, second chances, and the opportunities Sarah could provide. He talked about her stable marriage, her financial resources, her genuine desire to build a relationship with Emma. He made it sound reasonable, like taking Emma away from everything she knew was the compassionate choice. Then Catherine stood. Your Honor, this case isn't about money or opportunities. It's about what Emma needs to thrive. And what she needs is stability, continuity, and the parent who's been there for her entire life. Catherine's voice was steady, calm. Lucas Hale isn't perfect. He works long hours, he worries about money, he makes mistakes. But he shows up. Every day without fail, he shows up for his daughter. That's what matters. She presented Naomi's letters from Emma's teacher and Mrs. Chen, documentation of Lucas's employment and income. Then she sat down. The judge reviewed everything in silence. Minutes passed. Lucas's heart hammered against his ribs. I've made my decision, the judge said finally. In custody cases, the standard is what serves the best interest of the child. And while Ms. Calloway has demonstrated significant improvement in her circumstances, I cannot ignore 8 years of absence. 8 years of no contact, no support, no relationship with Emma. Sarah's face went pale. Emma is thriving in her current environment. She has friends, a community, a parent who's been consistent and devoted. While Ms. Calloway may be able to provide financial advantages, I find that the emotional stability Lucas Hale provides is more valuable to Emma's well-being. The judge looked directly at Sarah. Your petition for custody modification is denied. Primary physical custody remains with Lucas Hale. Lucas heard the words but couldn't process them. Denied. Custody remains. He'd won. Catherine squeezed his arm. Breathe, he breathed. The judge continued. However, I am granting Ms. Calloway supervised visitation rights. 1 weekend per month, increasing to unsupervised if the relationship develops positively. Emma is old enough to have input into this schedule, and I expect both parties to consider her preferences. Miss. Sarah was crying. Quiet, restrained tears that her lawyer tried to shield from view. Lucas felt a complicated mix of relief and pity. She'd lost. But maybe losing was what she'd earned. Court is adjourned. The gavel came down. Lucas stood on shaky legs. Catherine was saying something about paperwork, about visitation schedules, but Lucas wasn't listening. He turned and found Naomi standing in the aisle. Congratulations, she said quietly. Thank you for coming, and for the letter. I told you I'd do it. She paused. Your daughter is lucky. I'm the lucky one. People were filing out around them. Sarah walked past, not looking at Lucas, supported by her husband. Catherine was gathering files. The courtroom was emptying, but Naomi stayed, and so did Lucas. I should get back to Emma, he said finally. Mrs. Chen's watching her, and I need to tell her, go. We'll talk later. Okay, Lucas nodded and headed for the door. He was halfway down the courthouse steps when he realized something. Naomi had taken an entire afternoon off work to sit in a courtroom for someone who was just supposed to be her employee. That wasn't just returning a favor, that was something else. But he didn't have time to think about it now. He needed to get to Emma. The drive home took forever. Lucas kept replaying the judge's words, making sure he'd heard them right. Custody remains with Lucas Hale. Emma was his. Still his, always his. Mrs. Chen answered the door before he could get his key out. Well, I won. She stays with me. Mrs. Chen pulled him into a hug that smelled like jasmine tea and relief. I knew you would. That girl belongs with you. Emma appeared in the hallway behind her. Dad, what happened? Lucas knelt down so he was eye level with her. You're staying here, kiddo. With me. Nothing's changing. I wasn't going to leave anyway, Emma said matter-of-factly. I told the judge that. You did? Yeah. She asked where I wanted to live, and I said here, with you. Emma hugged him. This is my home. Lucas held her tight and let himself believe it was finally over. The hearing, the fear, the sleepless nights wondering if he was good enough. He was good enough. The judge had said so. Emma had said so. That had to count for something. That night, after Emma was asleep, Lucas sat on his porch with a beer and his phone. He typed out a text to Naomi. Thank you again for today. It meant a lot. Her response came fast. You would have won without me, but I'm glad I could help. Can I buy you dinner? To say thank you properly? A longer pause this time. Then, are you asking your boss to dinner? Lucas smiled. I'm asking the person who sat in a courtroom for 3 hours to help someone she barely knows. The boss thing is separate. That's a significant distinction. Is that a yes? Another pause. Friday, 7 p.m. I'll text you the address. Lucas put the phone down and looked out at his quiet street, the house with the water stain and the secondhand furniture, the truck with the bad starter, the life he'd built from nothing with a daughter who deserved everything. It wasn't perfect. It never would be. But it was enough. Friday came faster than Lucas expected. He dropped Emma at Sadie's house for a sleepover, her first since the custody hearing, because Lucas had been too paranoid to let her out of his sight before, then went home and stared at his closet. He owned exactly one suit now, the one he'd bought for the hearing. It would have to do. The restaurant Naomi had chosen was downtown, the kind of place with cloth napkins and a wine list longer than a phone book. Lucas felt out of place the moment he walked in, but the hostess smiled and led him to a table by the window. Naomi was already there, wearing a simple black dress that probably cost more than his truck. She looked different outside her office. Softer, maybe? Or maybe Lucas was just seeing her differently. You're on time, she said as he sat down. You sound surprised. Most people make me wait. I'm not most people. No, Naomi said, studying him. You're not. They ordered. Lucas got steak because it was the only thing on the menu he recognized. Naomi got some kind of fish with a French name. The wine came, expensive and complex. Lucas drank it and tried not to wince. So, Naomi said, how does it feel? Winning? Weird. Good weird, but weird. Lucas set down his glass. I keep waiting for something to go wrong. Nothing's going to go wrong. The judge made her ruling. Sarah can visit, but Emma stays with you. Ans? T? I know. But for 8 years I've been waiting for the other shoe to drop. For someone to realize I have no idea what I'm doing and take Emma away. Now that it didn't happen, I don't know how to feel. Maybe try relief or pride. Naomi's expression softened. You're a good father, Lucas. Stop doubting that. You keep saying that, but you've never seen me parent. I've seen how you talk about Emma. I've seen you leave work early for school conferences and stay late to make up the time. I've seen you fight for her without hesitation. She paused. That's all the proof I need. The food arrived. They ate in comfortable silence for a while, the restaurant buzzing around them with conversations and clinking glasses. Can I ask you something? Lucas said eventually. Of course. Why did you really come to the hearing? You didn't have to do that. Eat. Naomi set down her fork. Do you want the professional answer or the honest one? Honest. Because I admire you. The way you balance being a father and doing this job that's completely foreign to you. The way you stood up to Kenneth even when it could have cost you everything. The way you don't compromise who you are to fit in. She looked at him. I spent so long building walls to protect myself that I forgot what it was like to just be honest with people. You reminded me. Lucas didn't know what to say to that, so he said the only thing that felt true. You're not as cold as you pretend to be. Yes, I am. I have to be. No, you want to be. There's a difference. Lucas leaned forward. You came to that hearing. You sent those texts checking on me. You're sitting here having dinner with your employee, even though it probably breaks a dozen company policies. That's not cold. That's human. Naomi's eyes glistened. Just barely. Just for a second. Then she blinked it away. Maybe I'm tired of being cold. So stop. It's not that simple. Why not? Because letting people in means they can hurt you. And I've spent my entire adult life making sure nobody can do that. Lucas thought about Sarah leaving, about 8 years of single parenting and fear and wondering if he was enough. People can hurt you whether you let them in or not. At least if you let them in, you get something good first. Naomi smiled. Small, genuine, the first truly unguarded expression Lucas had ever seen from her. When did you become a philosopher? When I started fixing things. You learn a lot about how stuff works when you take it apart. And what have you learned about me? Lucas considered that. You're scared of being your father, of failing the way he did. So you work twice as hard and trust half as much. But you're not him. You're better. You just don't believe it yet. Naomi was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "How do you do that?" Do what? See through people. You did it with Kenneth's fraud, with the actuator failure, with me. You see what's actually there instead of what people want you to see. I just pay attention. Most people don't. Most people aren't you. Naomi reached across the table and took his hand. It was tentative, uncertain, the gesture of someone who didn't do this often. Thank you. For tonight. For reminding me there's more to life than quarterly reports and board meetings. Lucas looked at their hands. Hers smooth and manicured, his calloused and scarred from years of manual work. They shouldn't fit. Nothing about this should work. But it did. This is complicated, he said quietly. I know. You're my boss. I'm aware. And I've got Emma, and you've got a company to run, and we're from completely different worlds. Are you trying to talk yourself out of this or me out of it? Naomi asked. Both. Neither. Lucas squeezed her hand. I'm saying it's complicated, and I don't know how it works. But I want to try if you do. I do. Naomi's smile was real now, warm in a way that transformed her entire face. I haven't wanted to try anything personal in years, but with you, I do. They finished dinner talking about everything except work. Naomi told him about growing up with a father who measured success in dollars and failure in anything less. Lucas told her about learning to change Emma's diapers while reading instruction manuals at 2 a.m. They traded stories about worse jobs, best vacations never taken, dreams deferred. By the time they left the restaurant, it was past 11. Lucas walked Naomi to her car, a different luxury sedan, because apparently CEOs had multiple cars like normal people had multiple pairs of shoes. So what happens now? Naomi asked. I don't know. We figure it out as we go? That's not much of a plan. Plans are overrated. I've been improvising for 8 years and it's worked out okay. Naomi laughed, a real laugh, unguarded and genuine. I like you, Lucas Hale. I like you too, Naomi Voss. She kissed him, quick, soft, over before Lucas could fully process it was happening. Then she got in her car and drove away, leaving Lucas standing in the parking lot wondering if he'd just imagined the whole night. His phone buzzed. Text from Naomi. That wasn't imaginary. See you Monday. Lucas smiled and drove home to his house on Maple Street, where Emma would be tomorrow and life would go back to normal. Except normal was different now. Better. Fuller. The next few months passed in a rhythm Lucas was still learning. Work during the week, Emma on nights and weekends, and Naomi woven through it all in unexpected ways. They kept it quiet at first. Just dinners, conversations that stretched past midnight, the careful dance of two people learning to trust. Sarah's visit started in January. Once a month, supervised by a social worker, Emma would spend a Saturday with the mother she didn't remember. Lucas hated it, but Emma came home each time talking about Sarah's house, her husband Richard, the baby that would be her half-sister. Do you want to see her more? Lucas asked after the third visit. Emma shrugged. She's nice, but she's not my mom, not really. She's just Sarah. That was enough for Lucas. Emma could build whatever relationship she wanted with Sarah, but she knew where home was. The Series 7 went into production in February. Full rollout, 40,000 units, all meeting Bachmann's specifications. The contract was back on track. The company was thriving. Kenneth Marsh was indicted on securities fraud and awaiting trial. And Lucas was still showing up every day, still solving problems nobody else could see, still earning his place in a world he'd stumbled into by accident. In March, Naomi asked if Emma wanted to come to dinner at her apartment. Lucas was nervous. This was crossing a line from whatever they'd been doing into something real. But Emma said yes without hesitation. Naomi lived in a penthouse that made her office look modest. Floor-to-ceiling windows, furniture that belonged in museums, a kitchen bigger than Lucas's entire house. Emma's eyes went wide. "You live here by yourself?" "I do," Naomi said. "That's sad. It's too big for one person." Naomi smiled. "Maybe you're right." They ordered pizza, Naomi's concession to having an 8-year-old guest, and ate on the balcony overlooking the city. Emma asked a million questions about Naomi's job, the view, whether she ever got lonely. "Sometimes," Naomi admitted, "but less lately." Emma looked at Lucas, then at Naomi, then back at Lucas with the knowing expression of a kid who saw more than adults gave her credit for. "Are you guys dating?" Lucas choked on his pizza. Naomi calmly set down her glass. "Would that bother you if we were?" Emma thought about it. "No, I like her. She's smart and she doesn't treat me like I'm stupid." "High praise," Naomi said. "Plus Dad's been way less grumpy since he started seeing you." "I haven't been grumpy," Lucas protested. "You were super grumpy, like all the time." Emma grinned. "But now you smile at your phone and sing in the car. It's weird, but good weird." Naomi looked at Lucas with amusement. "You sing in the car?" "Badly, very badly." "I want to hear this." "Absolutely not." They stayed on the balcony until Emma started yawning. Lucas carried her to the car, half asleep, buckled her in, then went back upstairs to say goodbye to Naomi. "She likes you," he said. "I like her too. She's remarkable." Naomi pulled him close. "You raised someone remarkable." "She raised herself mostly. I just tried not to screw it up too badly." "Oh." "You did better than just not screwing up." Naomi kissed him, slower this time, deeper. "Stay tonight?" Lucas wanted to, but Emma was asleep in the car and Mrs. Chen wasn't available and he couldn't just leave his daughter alone. "I can't, Emma. I know. It's okay." Naomi touched his face. "Go be a dad. I'll still be here." Lucas drove home with Emma mumbling in her sleep about pizza and tall buildings. He carried her inside, tucked her into bed, then stood in her doorway watching her the way he'd done 1,000 times before. This was his life. Balancing fatherhood and work, and now this thing with Naomi that felt too good to be real. It was messy and complicated and nothing like what he'd planned. But maybe that was the point. Maybe life wasn't supposed to be planned. Maybe it was supposed to be built piece by piece, day by day, from whatever materials you had. Lucas had started with a baby, a garage, and no idea what he was doing. Now he had Emma, a career he'd never imagined, and someone who looked at him like he was worth more than grease and calloused hands. That was enough. More than enough. By the time spring arrived, Lucas and Naomi had stopped hiding. The engineering team knew. Josh had figured it out first, spotting them leaving together one evening. Rachel had rolled her eyes and said it was obvious. Martin had just shrugged and told Lucas not to let it affect his work. At the company dinner Naomi hosted in April, the one Lucas had been required to attend, he brought Emma as his date. She wore a dress Mrs. Chen had helped pick out and charmed every executive she met. Naomi introduced her to the board, and Emma asked the CFO replacement pointed questions about fiscal responsibility that made the man laugh nervously. "Your daughter is terrifying," Naomi whispered to Lucas. "She gets it from you." "I'm not terrifying." "You absolutely are. It's part of your charm." Naomi smiled and squeezed his hand under the table. Later, when the speeches were done and people were mingling, the board chair pulled Lucas aside. "Naomi tells me you're the one who uncovered Kenneth's fraud. I just found the evidence. Martin and Rachel did most of the work. Humble. I like that." The board chair, a woman in her 60s named Margaret, studied him. When Naomi first told me she was hiring a mechanic with no degree, I thought she'd lost her mind. But you've proven yourself. This company is better for having you. Thank you. Don't thank me. Just keep doing what you're doing. Margaret glanced at Naomi across the room. And keep doing whatever you're doing with her. I've known Naomi for 10 years and I've never seen her this happy. That's worth more than any quarterly report. Lucas watched Naomi talking to Emma, both of them laughing about something. Emma was showing Naomi something on her phone, probably pictures of her rabbit or a video of Marcus eating paste. I don't know what I'm doing, Lucas admitted. With her, with this job, with any of it. I'm just trying not to mess up. That's all any of us are doing. Margaret patted his shoulder. The difference is you're honest about it. The dinner ended late. Lucas drove Emma home, got her ready for bed, then sat on the porch waiting for Naomi. She'd said she'd come by after handling some last-minute business. She arrived at midnight, still in her dress from the dinner, looking exhausted and beautiful. Emma asleep? Out cold. She had 3 desserts and charmed your entire board. I noticed. Naomi sat beside him on the porch steps. Margaret cornered me afterward, said I should make your position permanent if I haven't already. It is permanent. I mean, permanent. A P of diagnostics. Your own team. Real authority. Lucas blinked. I don't know what to say. Say yes. You've earned it. The Series 7 redesign alone saved us $200 million. You've solved a dozen other problems since then. You make this company better. Naomi leaned against him. And I don't want to lose you because some other firm offers you more money. I'm not going anywhere. Promise? Promise. They sat in silence, looking at the quiet street. Lucas's house with its fixed ceiling and new water heater. The truck with its replaced starter. The life that had changed so much in less than a year, it barely resembled what he'd started with. I love you, Naomi said quietly. I don't say that easily. I maybe haven't said it at all before, but I love you. Lucas felt something settle in his chest, warm and certain. I love you too. Even though I'm terrifying? Especially because you're terrifying. Naomi laughed and kissed him. They stayed on the porch until the sky started lightening, talking about the future in vague, hopeful terms. Nothing concrete. They were both too practical for fairy tale endings. But possibilities, options, a path forward that included both of them. 3 months later, Naomi sold her penthouse and bought a house 10 minutes from Lucas. Not quite moving in together, but close. A compromise between her world and his, with room for Emma and room for the life they were building. Emma helped her pick out furniture, practical stuff, not museum pieces. Naomi learned to cook badly, with Emma as her patient teacher. They had family dinners on Sundays, the 3 of them plus Mrs. Chen, eating whatever experiment Naomi had attempted that week. It wasn't perfect. Naomi still worked too much. Lucas still worried he wasn't enough. Emma still asked hard questions about families and belonging. They fought sometimes, about work-life balance, about parenting decisions Lucas had been making alone for years, about how to blend their complicated lives. But they figured it out, piece by piece, day by day. One Saturday in July, Lucas was in his garage, the actual garage, working on a customer's car because he couldn't quite give up the work that had defined him, when Emma and Naomi showed up. We brought lunch, Emma announced, holding up a bag from the diner. They ate on the hood of the Camry Lucas was fixing. Grease and French fries and the summer sun making everything feel lazy and possible. I've been thinking, Naomi said, about us, about making this permanent. Try it. Lucas looked at her. Permanent how? However you want. Marriage, partnership, just being together. I don't care about labels. I care about you and Emma and whatever we're building here. Emma perked up. Are you asking Dad to marry you? Maybe. Would that be okay with you? Yeah. You're basically already family. Emma bit into her burger. Plus your house has a pool. Mercenary, Lucas said. Practical, Emma corrected. Naomi laughed. So is that a yes? Lucas thought about the journey that had brought them here. A broken-down car on a dark highway. A job offer that seemed insane. A custody battle that could have destroyed everything. Piece by piece, problem by problem, building something that shouldn't work but did. Yeah, he said. That's a yes. Emma cheered. Naomi kissed him, tasting like ketchup and promises. And Lucas sat there on the hood of a half-fixed car, covered in grease, with the two people who'd become his whole world. This was what mattered. Not the money or the title or the fancy office. Not the big dramatic gestures or the perfect endings. Just showing up. Being honest. Doing the work. Loving the people who loved you back. Lucas had learned a long time ago that broken things could be fixed if you were patient enough to find the problem. Turns out the same was true for broken people. You just had to be willing to take yourself apart, look at what was actually there, and rebuild it into something better. He'd done that. Naomi had done that. And together, with Emma holding them accountable and keeping them honest, they'd built something worth keeping. Not perfect, never perfect, but real and whole. And finally, beautifully enough. The sun climbed higher, the garage smelled like oil and summer. And Lucas Hale, mechanic, father, diagnostic specialist, and improbably the partner of a CEO, ate lunch with his family and thought about how far he'd come from that November night, when a luxury car had broken down outside his shop. He'd fixed a lot of things since then, engines and actuators and corporate fraud, but the best thing he'd fixed was himself, the parts that thought he wasn't enough. The fear that he'd never be more than a guy with grease under his nails. Turned out he was more than enough. He always had been. He just needed to believe it. And now, finally, he did.